Did I bang it? Okay. We're missing our mayor. You won't mind? Okay, he'll show up. All right, very good. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Vanessa Nordyke. I am the vice chair this year for the Budget Committee. Our chair, Sally Cook, will be here in due course, and I'll be running the meeting until she can join us. I'm calling to order the meeting of the City of Salem Budget Committee for April 24, 2019. Before we call the roll, I would like to take a moment to introduce our three new committee members: Raj Shirak from Ward 2, Steve McCoy from Ward 4, and William Anderson from Ward 6, who were all appointed last month. Please join me in welcoming our new board members. Welcome and thank you for your interest in participating. Now, can the recorder please call the roll?
Mayor Bennett?
Here.
Member Kaiser?
Present.
Member Tom Anderson?
Likewise.
Member Nanke?
Here.
Member Leung?
Here.
Member Osick?
Here.
Member Hoy?
Here.
Member Cook? Absent. Member Lewis?
Here.
Member Nordyke?
Here.
Member Tigan?
Here.
Member Shirak?
Here.
Member Moore Green? Absent. Member McCoy?
Here.
Member Barker?
Here.
Member William Anderson?
Here.
Member Sund?
Here.
Member Milton?
Here.
Thank you. Now will you all please join me in the Pledge of the Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. All right. So the first item on our agenda this night is public testimony. This is the opportunity for individual testimony from members of the public. And I must remind you that all individual testimony is limited to 3 minutes for this section. And as someone who's used to telling lawyers when it is their turn to finish wrapping up, I will have no problem reminding other folks it is their turn to finish wrapping up. A yellow light will appear at the podium when 2 minutes have passed, and a red light will signal that your time is up. Groups are asked to select a spokesperson whose testimony will be limited to 5 minutes if you're speaking on behalf of the group. After a spokesperson testimony, all those belonging to the group in the audience may indicate support by a show of hands. If other members of the same group have additional information not shared by their spokesperson, their testimony is limited to 3 minutes. All right, very good. So I have a list of those who signed up to provide testimony, and I apologize in advance for any mispronunciations of names. I see we have a Kate Newswanger. Would you please step forward? And I would encourage folks to queue up so that we can efficiently move through our public testimony. So please come on up.
Hello. My name is Kate. I am an 8th grade student at Jane Goodall Environmental Middle School here in Salem. And the cause I am here to speak about today is the Climate Action Plan. As we can see from the recent greenhouse gas inventory, the main emitter of greenhouse gases in our community is transportation. This means that if we want to help save the environment, we need to cut back on these kinds of emissions. This would require using more efficient ways to travel, such as walking, biking, or taking buses instead of single-person cars. Now, the reason that I care about a climate action plan is because if we don't take action now, my future and the future of generations after me is at stake. This means that, well, we need to take action soon unless we want our world to be destroyed in front of our eyes.
Yes.
So I'd really appreciate it if you'd think about supporting this climate action plan as one of the causes that you support. And yeah, Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Did anyone have any questions for our speaker? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Our next speaker is Linnell Wilcox.
Good evening, councilors, Mayor Bennett, and citizen members of the Budget Committee. My name is Linnell Wilcox, and I live in Ward 3. And I'm speaking tonight on behalf of 350 Salem, Oregon, which is the local chapter of the international grassroots climate change activist group, 350.org. In the Salem area, we have 36 members and a mailing list of over 471 people who receive our e-newsletter twice a month. On October 23, 2017, the City Council adopted the new strategic plan, a 3 to 5 year framework to chart a course forward for Salem during a time of change and growth. And we thank the Council for including in that strategic plan an environmental action plan, which in turn included a specific call for a climate action plan. We also thank the city for taking the first step in developing that climate action plan by taking an inventory of the greenhouse gases emitted by our community. The inventory has been completed, and a draft report of its findings presented to the members of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee of the Our Salem Growth and Development Project. The inventory was very revealing, and it shows us where we can most effectively focus our energies in reducing carbon emissions. Some of the actions which will likely emerge from the Our Salem process will help in this regard, particularly in the area of transportation, and this will be a significant contribution. But a climate action plan is comprehensive, and it involves not just the transportation sector. 4 additional sectors were addressed in the inventory, and all 4 must be included in any kind of meaningful climate action plan. Those include residential and commercial fuel combustion, which is mainly natural gas, electricity, water and wastewater, and solid waste disposal. These sectors will not be directly addressed in the Our Salem process. We need a separate process for the climate action plan. So we've taken the first step on the climate action plan, but we need to continue down this path. The next step is to begin an assessment of the specific actions of our community which we can take to both mitigate carbon emissions and to adapt to the inevitable climate impacts that we are already experiencing. Climate change is the most long-term and devastating threat that faces humanity. The most recent report of the International Panel on Climate Change gives us only 12 months to reverse our emission of greenhouse gases or face catastrophic global climate effects. We can't afford inaction. Yes, our community has important problems to solve. We always do, and we always will. But we simply have to find a way to balance meeting current needs with preserving a livable planet and a vibrant Salem for all who follow. So we at 350 Salem urge you to please do all that you can to fund the climate action plan and keep it moving forward. Thank you.
Yes, Member Lewis.
Thanks, Linda. 2 questions. One, you said we have 12 months. I think you meant 12 years.
12 years, excuse
Thank
me,
you.
yes.
And the study that you quoted, when did that study come out?
That was that October, November of last year? No, I think it's been more recent. But I'll say, I'm not sure.
End of last year?
Yeah, it's within the last year. It's been pretty recent.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Walmark. Next on our list is Jacqueline Shindell.
You slaughtered it. It's Shindell. I would like to thank very much the wonderful mayor, who's one of my neighbors, and the council people, as well as the budget committee, for the chance to testify in front of you in regards to the CIP as well as the sidewalk issue in Northeast neighborhood. We are part of Ward 1, and we have 2 counselors, Tom as well as Cara, and unfortunately the letter from NIN is not in the packet, and I believe that's because Leslie Polson, our secretary, has been quite ill, and so unfortunately expect it in a couple days. So I read through the CIP when it was out last week, and I reported it my findings to NIN. Now, NIN is not in very much of it, but then we're used to being pretty much left out of the ball game. But we do very much want to thank the Budget Committee for including something that we've been working on for at least 7 years, and that is the flashing light signal at 13th and Marion. This is behind Safeway. This is a shortcut for a lot of North Salem High School students, as well as the neighborhood, to shop. And taking your life into your own hands, it's pretty scary. So this has been slated for 2020, and we really, as a whole neighborhood, appreciate the inclusion of this. Now, something that we had talked about with the Transportation Department, we noticed did not make it into the CIP for 2020, 21, 22, 23, or 24. And that is the same type of flashing light on 15th and Market. Now, Barrick Field is going to be the new athletic field for North High during their 2-year renovation program. So I'm a neighborhood association, so I get 5 minutes. A lot of the students will be cutting across busy Market Street. And children being children and adults being children, they will not go down to Capitol Street to cross, nor up to 17th to cross. There is a marked crosswalk, but cars do not stop. 2 women from the First Church of the Nazarene, which fronts there, have been hit and hospitalized. It is a dangerous intersection. So we would like, please, some reconsideration. The last point is sidewalks on 15th Street. I have contacted several of my neighbors who are physically handicapped, and they are unable to use the sidewalk, as well as all the North Salem High School students who are now parking on 16th Street, and they cut through on 15th. The sidewalk is probably the worst in Salem, going from D to Nebraska. And it's pretty bad on both sides of the street. There is a testimony in here from Egan Boddicker, who is legally blind, who has a terrible problem. Tom Walsh, whose wife has terrific mobility issues. Unfortunately, Marge Laux, L-A-U-X's testimony did not come in on time. She has tremendous balance issues and cannot navigate the sidewalks, as well as Jeremy Parker, who has perhaps the worst sidewalk in the city of Salem in front of his house. And he's very worried. His insurance company has told him he has a tremendous liability issue. He'd like to go out and chop the tree down. And he lives at 940 15th. I got a lovely letter from the city from Brandon Klukas, who says that he will be out in the next couple of days putting white marks on the sidewalk. Well, we've had white marks on the sidewalk for 30 years, and it hasn't done anything to repair them. So we would like, please, something more than white marks on the sidewalk. Peter, you told me if I got people who were physically handicapped to write, you would really look into it. And I would very, very much appreciate if you could somehow find some money to fix the worst of the worst so these people can leave their homes. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on our list is Aubrey Harrington.
Hi, I'm Audrey Harrington, and I live on Mousebird Avenue in West Salem. We are faced with a crisis, one that is not only affecting our country, but the whole world as we know it. One so big, it could wipe out almost every plant, animal, and person on Earth. Climate change will only continue to worsen if we don't take a stand and tackle it head on. I am here on behalf of Plant for the Planet, an organization of young people who have recognized this impending crisis, that we may not have a home if we do not take action now. Our generation is the future, and we do not want our time cut short due to climate change. At Plant for the Planet, one of the main things we do is partner with other organizations to plant trees. However, our efforts to help mitigate the climate crisis are being hindered because as we plant trees, others are being cut down. Even here in the United States, illegal logging and clear cutting are some of the major contributors to deforestation. If we could pass and enforce laws and regulations to reduce these two problems, it would greatly increase the odds of reversing climate change. Locally, I would like to propose that we pass a city-level ordinance to require that for each tree removed, two trees are planted in its place. In cases where trees cannot be replanted on site, a donation should be made to organizations such as Friends of Trees or Plant for the Planet, who in turn would plant trees in alternate locations. We could even use these donations to create a city tree fund that homeowners could use to create a city tree, that homeowners could use to request trees being planted on their property. These would ensure that our tree canopy continues to grow instead of decline over time. There are lots of other things besides planting trees that can help avert the climate crisis, but planting trees in our community is a relatively inexpensive solution, which could raise our property values, result in cleaner air, and more pleasant neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Ms. Harrington.
Thanks.
Marc Wig.
Thank you, Marc Wig. I'm back. But I have other stuff. And we got a different audience.
New stuff?
Okay. I'm here on the Marine Drive issue, the general obligation bond. And what my understanding is what the proposal right now is to build between Cameo Drive and Glen Creek. And to finish that section, build a street there. And that's part of Marine Drive, and eventually when we have Marine Drive, that might be a useful section. But right now, all these people down here already have good circulation. They can get to Roth's, they can get to Glen Creek. They don't need another road for circulation. Now, we just heard people talk about climate and what we can do about climate change. Well, transportation is a huge thing here. Let's get people out of their cars. The way to get people out of their cars is to take the money that would go here, buy all the right-of-way from Cameo and Fifth all the way out to this apartment complex at Herrick. You have hundreds of people along this side of Wallace Road that if you have a child and you say go to Ross, that child on this side has to cross Wallace, go down the bike path on Wallace, cross Glen Creek, and then cross Wallace. Glen Creek and Wallace, that's like 14 lanes combined. Now, how old would your child have to be before you felt comfortable sending them out to get some milk at Ross? I'm not comfortable. And when you see kids on Wallace Road, they're on the sidewalk. That's illegal. It's dangerous. And so give them an alternative. Buy the right-of-way. Within weeks of buying the right-of-way and staking it, a path will be formed. We've built paths with volunteers all over the city of Salem. With the help of Public Works, they've been really good, really cooperative, and the paths are used by a lot of people. Let's do that again. And let's do the tree planting now, after you buy the right-of-way. Then when you have Marine Drive, it'll be really pretty. Make it a promenade. Make it an attraction so that people come to it. And then they won't drive. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right. Next on our list, I unfortunately can't make out the handwriting here, but I assume it must be this gentleman. Please make sure to introduce yourself from the podium.
Good evening. E.M. Easterly, Ward 8, members of the Budget Committee, Madam Deputy Chair, and Mr.
Such as it
Mayor.
is.
I'm testifying tonight because our mayor on Monday night made a suggestion that when you have an issue concerning the allocation of capital funds, it must be addressed through the capital fund process. The mayor graciously informed me this evening that that wasn't quite correct, but I'm going to go ahead with my conversation to the Budget Committee because it raises some other issues. Please help me understand why the 5-year CIP budget only allocates $690,000 from the 208 road bond. I am under the impression that over 8 million of these bond fund monies are unspent. What steps are required for the Budget Committee and eventually the City Council to allocate or revise the allocation of capital funds? How can citizens track unallocated capital funds before they are placed on the CIP or in the CIP budgeting process? I ask these questions, and I'm referencing the comment that I made earlier. Let me be absolutely clear. I am asking that the remaining Marine Drive 2008 GO bond funds be allocated to develop Marine Drive with an alignment that remains mostly within the current Salem urban growth boundary. That alignment would be between 5th Avenue and Herritt Drive. Yes, a future expansion of Marine Drive along Wallace Marine Park remains an option, but that option will require addressing complex issues, including expanding the UGB, facing federal social justice concerns focused on Pioneer Village, and more importantly, fail to address the current congestion on Wallace Road. I would note that the street improvements for the 2019-20 budget document does include the allocation of funds for building a section of Marine Drive between Glen Creek and Cameo. That's all well and fine. However, such a allocation came from 2012. I believe that it should be revised, and I ask that as the budget conversations are about the transportation budget, that this be considered there. My final comment was to ask you how to properly raise this reallocation issue and request an allocation change to the current Marine Drive GO bond budget allocation before the Budget Committee is my request for information.
Thank you, Mr. Easterly. And does anyone have any questions from the floor? All right. I wanted to thank Vice Chair Vanessa Nordag for filling in for me before I was there. Next to the mic, I'd like to call Eddie Benford-Rost.
Good evening, Mayor Bennett, City Councilors, committee members, and others. My name is Eddie Benford-Ross. I am a sophomore at South Salem High School, and I am here to express my support for the Climate Action Plan. 1.5 degrees Celsius. It sounds like such a small change in temperature. However, if our planet warms by just that much, it will have dire consequences. Sea levels will rise. Major cities will be threatened by changing coastlines. 90% of Earth's coral reefs will die off. Crop yields will fall, causing food shortages, and droughts and floods will become an increasing part of everyday life. And we may reach a point where climate change is out of our control. According to climate scientists, now in 2019, we have 11 years to stop this progression. By 2030, the world must cut its carbon emissions by 45%, and we cannot stop there. We must continue reducing carbon until we reach net zero. Across the globe, the effects of climate change are becoming more evident by the day. Astronomically high global temperatures, uncommonly low snow levels, melting glaciers and ice caps, dying marine life, once-in-a-lifetime storms coming every few years. These are just going to become worse if we do nothing. Now, in the United States, climate action is not going to happen at the federal level until at least 2021. So we have to start small. We need to start at the local level. We need to make a change right here, right now. Waiting for others to act is never the best course of action, because if everyone waits to act, nothing will ever get done. This is why we need to make change right here in the city of Salem. We need to fund things like the Climate Action Plan. Now, some might argue Salem doesn't release enough carbon to make a difference. I say we have to start small. We have to set the precedent. How can we expect other larger polluters to cut their emissions if we won't? We have to be an example for other cities, states, and even countries. We have waited for far too long for the federal government to do something about climate change, and they haven't. This is why we are here. There is no longer time for partisan politics. There is no longer time for arguing back and forth on the best course of action. There is no longer time to stall on climate change. We need to act now. We need to make change locally. We need to fund the Climate Action Plan. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I'd next like to call to the stand Steve Anderson.
Good evening. Steve Anderson, 3240 Geller Road Northwest. I'm here tonight as the mayor asked us to come tonight and follow up on a couple issues. I have a couple issues related to 5A on your agenda item in terms of allocation of funds for Marine Drive. First off, it shows a number of 3.5 million instead of the 3.6, which was for the original bond, and my understanding is that was to cover the cost of the bond. The question I have for this group in the budgeting process is why do we not allocate interest of that bond here to this part of the project to cover inflation costs, since we started this in 2008 and believe that needs to be corrected in the budget numbers for this none. Secondly, we talk about Marine Drive and the road from Glen Creek to Cameo. And there was a discussion Monday night about holding back funds from this bond money. And my question is, why are we holding back bond money funds and not committing it all to this process when the bond measure was put forth to the voters with a commitment to spend that on the Salem River Crossing and Marine Drive? And since the Salem River Crossing is no more, it seems like all those funds should go to purchase right away as the bond was presented to the voters and agreed upon by the voters. Additionally, just for information, I approached Councilman Lewis on Tuesday because I was a little uncomfortable on how I responded to his questions and wanted to reach out to him, and remembering some time from graduate school where I spent some time with Dr. Stephen R. Covey and his point to seek to understand the other person. I spoke with Jim and asked him about his position on this. He said he was adamant that he wants to go Glen Creek to Cameo. In my mind, that's the road to nowhere. But I asked Jim if he'd be open for a compromise, because I said, if there's enough money to purchase all of the right-of-way, can we do that? And so I said I would get some information. There is enough money in this bond fund to purchase all the right-of-way, both the Glen Creek to Cameo and the 5th Street to Herrick portion of it. I still believe that the most cost-effective way is the 5th Street to Herrick, and we ought to change that because council needs to direct staff on that. But I think for all the reasons that I mentioned before, that's the best way to go. We need to honor our obligation to the voters, to the citizens of West Salem, to get that going for connections for local access and circulation and pedestrian connectivity. So I thank you, and want to let you know that I felt I needed to talk with Jim because I was uncomfortable in that conversation, and Jim has been very open to talk with me, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Councilor Lewis?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I think you've touched everything except for one thing. And I think, hopefully I made this clear because I think I repeated it 3 times. I will not be in favor of anything to do with Marine Drive unless the acquisition of property starts at Glen Creek and goes north. Hopefully you remember that.
Yes, I remember that. And I think that is open in this idea that there's enough money to do both those.
I remember saying clearly, start at Glen Creek and move north until we run out of money.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Councilor Lewis, and thank you, Mr. Anderson. Next for testimony is Soren Urban.
Hi, my name is Soren Urban. I am in 8th grade at Heritage School, and I live in Salem. I have come here today to talk to you about my future. My future will be heavily affected by climate change. You might not be around to experience its deadly effects, but I will. Most of the people testifying today are adults. Their testimony matters, but kids' testimony matters the most, because it will be our future that you are making decisions on. You are making decisions about all the children's future. The climate crisis will one day catch up with us, and we will have to pay for all that we have done. With drastic change in the weather, stronger storms, extreme heat in some areas, and extreme cold in others, the climate crisis is worsening rapidly. Also, the number of people who have breathing problems is going up fast, and the people currently affected are getting worse. So unless you take action for our future, then we will not have a future. Think of a kid who you know really well and make him or her the driving focus to fight climate change. You have the power to save that kid and all the kids' future. Most of the people here today are trying to save the kids' future. You are voting on our future. I strongly urge you to set aside money to fight climate change. The money you set aside will go to support all children's future. That money will help your children and your children's children. Thank you.
Thank you, Soren. And next for public testimony, Linnell Wilcox.
Hi, my name is Linnell Wilcox, and I live at 1785 Norway Street, Northeast, and I'm here to...
Ms. Wilcox, could I interrupt you for a second?
Yes.
Can you pull down the microphone, please, so we can hear you? Thank you.
My name is Linnell Wilcox, and I live on Norway Street, Northeast in Salem. I'm here to convey the value of warming shelters and the need for the Homeless Rental Assistance Program to remain fully funded. Those things are very closely related. When budget cuts are necessary, I know there's no way to make everyone happy. The current proposal includes a cut to the ATRAP program from $1.4 million to $700,000. Reasons include a low wait list of only 6 people, but housing stopped accepting referrals in November, so a wait list of 6 people doesn't reflect the actual larger backlog of potential referrals. It's also, another reason is that not enough landlords or capacity exists to justify the $1.4 million budget. But for programs that require relationship building, the past isn't predictive of future capacity. Capacity would increase as relationships grow and trust grows. My understanding is that now there's an adequate pool of landlords investing in the program, and if housing coordination needs more capacity, maybe the city could do an RFP for others to also do pieces of the coordination work. Studies show that it costs 3 times less to house people than not to house people. As a program that saves money in the long run, I wish that ATRAP would be excluded from the cuts. Why do I care? I've been volunteering at the warming shelters for 3 years now, and the work has been life-changing and heart-changing. It's led me to shift many of my beliefs. The first time I volunteered, Ken Houghton was the lead, and he shared that many people live paycheck to paycheck, and a health crisis or a job loss or a large rent increase could make anybody not be able to afford their rent. They might get evicted. They might be homeless if they didn't have family support or a savings account. The stories that I've heard from working at a warming shelter led me to see how many traumas are prevalent, how living in crisis and survival mode creates more trauma, and how homelessness really can happen to any of us. Stories have conveyed how many people are just struggling just to figure out logistics to get from appointments to places that serve food, how to go to the court dates, places to get, how to get to showers, laundry services, how to hide their property when they're going someplace, where they're going to sleep at night, where they can be, that they're not going to be violating a no trespassing zone, where can they park if they're car camping, how to get basic supplies, how to get from place to place if you don't have a car, money, a bus pass, gas money, how to pay for fines or court fees, how to pay $40 for each probation or parole officer visit. I didn't know we charged for that. When most of us can relate to just having a hard day, that it's hard to get out of bed just because, you know, my cat pooped on the carpet, my work is having layoffs, those things can have you feel overwhelmed and not able to even get out of bed, and multiply that exponentially when you're living in survival mode. I've heard so many people lose hope. Why go to a court date if it's hard to get there? Your property might get stolen. You're just going to get more jail time. You're going to have more fees than you can afford to pay. You already can't keep your head above water.
Ms. Wilcox, excuse me if I can stop you. Your time is up, but you do have a question from Councilor Hoy.
Okay.
Councilor Hoy?
Sorry.
Thank you,
Didn't
Chair
talk
Cook.
fast enough.
I just wanted to clarify something I think I heard you say, and that was that referrals had stopped in November. Were you referring to the HRAP program?
Yeah.
And where did you get that information?
Arches, Ken might be able to speak to that.
Okay.
There is a handout. I gave this to somebody so you could have copies.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Hoy, did you want to make a request to receive more information about that?
I'll follow up on it later. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
It looks like we're at the end of our public testimony list. Is there anyone else who didn't have the opportunity to sign up, but who would like to provide comments on the agenda item? Okay, I don't see a back page, but if you'd like to go ahead and line up, please introduce yourself before speaking. The yellow light will give you your 1 minute warning, and when you're at red, please stop. Thank you.
My name is Sara Dolan, 2667 Orchard Heights Road, Northwest. I'd like to address the funding for the Climate Action Plan. I'll be brief. I do very much understand the budget issues and the tight budget and all the important things that need to be funded. My perspective is that the climate and our climate problems are so important that they're our biggest threat, and all the other important issues pale in comparison. And I think of kids that I have run into and also read about recently who say, why should we go to school when we don't know if there's a future for us? This future's very uncertain, and they wonder why we adults have for decades done very little about it. Homelessness, schools, public health, parks, you name it. They're all important, but in comparison to climate change, they're Band-Aids. They're putting the finger in the dike. Because if climate change continues the way it looks like it will, and we don't get a handle on it, we're going to have a lot of climate refugees in Oregon. We're going to have a lot more homeless people as society begins to break down. We'll be spending much more on the effects of disasters, which will leave less to spend on all the other important things. Public health, diseases, contamination, water shortages will all become bigger and more expensive challenges. To me, a well-prepared climate action plan for Salem is probably the wisest investment of our funds in light of a good future for our community, a livable future for our community. I urge you to fund the climate action plan with the best consultant you can find, as a lot of cities have already done, and I'd love to see Salem catch up. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, testimony.
Mayor Bennett and councilors, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Lori Doherty. I am a resident of Ward 2. I am also a member of 350 Salem, Oregon, a climate activist. I have been here several times in that capacity, and I'm here again in that capacity, but I'm also a student of the climate. I have master's in public policy. I took graduate level classes in environmental management, many of them involved, climate and related issues. This was before I moved to Salem when I was living in Massachusetts. But I still continue to read and, to learn. And I know what I see when you look at how scientists talk. They do very careful research. They're supposed to report things in very couched, careful terms. But when they go out and talk to the public, they're like shocked. Things are happening faster than they ever thought possible, faster than were predicted when they first started really being serious about looking into climate change. The weather is being affected. It's changing in heat. It's changing in drought. It's changing in floods, things like that. I want them to think about the 3 words we're talking about: climate action plan. Many of us have talked about the climate, what's happening to the climate, how it is spiraling out of control. Action is what we need to do about it, and that's all of us. In big ways and small ways, it's us as individuals, it's us as a community. Plan is what will make it real. We have the greenhouse gas inventory. We know where things stand. We know where the big issues and problems are in our community. But they will just sit there and in some kind of vague way unless we have a focused way of dealing with them. And that's what a plan means. It means setting goals. It means evaluating progress. It means tying things together, taking things as a whole. We need to take our Salem, which has lots of really good indicators and suggestions, which could, improve our climate action. But if they are separate from a plan, it's not going to happen. So I just want to be conscious of all those 3 words: a climate action plan, and we need to fund it because that's what will make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Doherty. All right, so moving on, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the December 2010-2018 meeting?
I move approval of the minutes from the 2018 meeting. I don't remember the date.
Okay, I have a motion from Member Hoy. Do I have a second? And I have a second from Member Dill. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of accepting the December 2010-2018 Budget Committee meeting minutes as provided, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by no. Motion passes. All right, moving on to our action items. As our action item this evening is the Capital Improvement Plan, or CIP, public hearing, we'll move on to information items. I'd like to ask Budget Officer Jacobs to review the handout material. Thank you, Officer Jacobs.
Good evening, Chair Cook, Mayor Bennett, and members of the Budget Committee. I'll very briefly review the information items that you received. All of the Budget Committee members received, either delivered to their homes or they picked them up for us, the proposed budget. And in that notebook, you have actually 2 budgets. You have the City of Salem budget at the beginning of the notebook. It's the larger of the 2 volumes. And then you have the Salem Urban Renewal Agency budget in the back of that notebook. You also received a capital improvement plan, which will be reviewed with you this evening. Josh Eggleston will conduct that public hearing. You, in your notebooks, you received the Budget Committee procedures and a very brief sort of high-level meeting review schedule so that you would know what was happening over this meeting and the next 2. I'd like to take just a moment and talk to you about the procedures that were in your notebook. These are the Budget Committee procedures. And under schedule, on the first page of the procedures, the meetings adjourn no later than 10 p.m., and a majority vote of the committee members in attendance can extend the meeting by half-hour intervals. So that's something to take note of as we're trying to put a lot of content into just 3 meetings. On the 3rd page of the procedures, under Roman numeral 9, voting.
Budget Officer Jacobs,
Yes.
I'm sorry, may I stop you? Can you give a page number? I want to make sure with all the material I'm following you and it's correct.
I'm sorry, it's handout 5C. So it would have, in your notebook, it would have been in the pocket, the inside pocket. It's part of your agenda packet. Your agenda packet starts with the agenda. It's like that. So on the 3rd page of the procedures, which is handout item 5C, under Roman numeral 9, voting, in order for a motion to pass, other than the one to extend the meeting time, it requires 10 yes votes and not just a simple majority of the members in attendance. And then finally, the one last thing I would like to review with you is also on page 3 under Roman numeral 13, and a wish list is noted there. And what that means in the context of the procedures is an acknowledgement that the committee may want to tentatively approve or at least close the review on all budgets before creating its final recommendation to the City Council. In the handout describing the content of this and upcoming meetings, the final meeting is generally reserved for the committee to determine its recommendation to the City Council. The wish list or parking lot or bike rack is a place where ideas for possible changes to the city manager's proposed budget can be documented. At the end of the review meetings, the proposed budget can then be balanced in the manner and with content as determined by the committee. And it has been the practice of the committee to add items to this list through a motion and vote. And then finally, in your handout material, there was an additions agenda this evening that was placed at your desk. And with that additions agenda, there were 3 pieces of public correspondence. The first from Egon Bodker regarding sidewalk repair, the second from Tom Roche regarding sidewalk repair, and the third from Kyle Buse regarding the youth development program. Thank you.
Thank you, Budget Officer Jacobs. Member Teagan.
Yeah, just a quick question for Budget Officer Jacobs. So can you describe how the vote on approving the CIP tonight interacts with the wish list? So if there's ideas, I mean, do we need to make changes to the CIP tonight or recommend changes to the budget, to the CIP tonight, or do those get taken up later in the process?
Sure. If this body, through the public hearing, chooses to recommend an amendment to the CIP, that can be done this evening at this meeting. If that recommendation to amend the CIP has a budget impact in the next fiscal year 2020, that would be then also part of a budget committee content, so we could potentially do that this evening as well.
I just feel like last year there was at some point in meeting number 3 where we realized we couldn't really open up the CIP because we had approved it in meeting number 1.
Right.
And is that correct?
And I think that as this body can recommend the CIP this evening to the City Council, but I think also until this body adjourns its business after the end of the 3rd meeting, you can revisit the CIP and amend your recommendation.
Thank you. Any other questions for Budget Officer Jacobs? All right, moving on then. It looks like we're at our information items. Oh, we're at public hearing. There we go. You're right. Thank you very much. So the committee's public hearing this evening is the city's financial year 2020 through 2024 capital improvement plan. The public hearing is now open. Does the Budget Office have a presentation?
We do, thank you.
Wonderful. Is there anyone present who would like to provide testimony regarding the capital improvement plan? Okay, the public hearing is now closed. Oh. Right, thank you. Trying to be very timely. Got ahead of myself.
I love your efficiency. It's awesome.
All right, deep breath.
Taking notes.
You were really fast. Thank you. Let's try this again, Josh. Do I need to reopen it since I did the gavel? I just am looking for another excuse with the gavel. Let's just go ahead.
Okay, let's go. Thank you.
Staff report.
Chair Cook, Mayor Bennett, councilors, and Budget Committee members, good evening. I'm Josh Eggleston with the Budget Office, here to present the proposed capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2020 through 2024. A capital improvement plan, or CIP, is a 5-year plan for capital spending. Like a budget, the CIP matches expected revenues with planned expenditures, but unlike a budget, the CIP has a multi-year timeline, which is helpful when planning large expenditures or projects that may span multiple years. Preparation of the CIP is governed by Council Policy C9. In addition, ORS Chapter 223 requires that projects financed by system development charges be part of an adopted financial plan. A CIP such as ours can be used to fulfill this requirement. CIP projects are identified in many ways, such as infrastructure assessments, planning processes, plan documents, and updates. For urban rural master plan updates and strategic action plans provide guidance and direction for included projects, as well as discussion at advisory board meetings. Overall, the assessment of current and future infrastructure needs and repairs are weighed against available financial resources. This larger group of identified issues are then evaluated for inclusion in the CIP. The CIP is noticed to the public in several ways, and often the projects that are included in the CIP are part of a master plan or other process that includes outreach to neighborhood associations or advisory boards. The CIP webpage includes information about the process and prior year CIP documents. It also includes a project request form for residents to submit projects to be considered for the CIP. In addition, on the website, it has a project map to help identify individual projects. The GIS team, which includes personnel from IT and Public Works, has updated the interactive CIP project map to give a visual representation of the projects by type and location. Users can click on the project icons and the project details will appear in a pop-up box. Each year, a public hearing is held to receive feedback and public comments on the plan. The public hearing is noticed through the weekly emailed Salem Community Connection, social media, and the Statesman Journal. The CIP is primarily a planning document and contains projects where likely funding sources have been identified, have a cost of $50,000 or more, and includes new projects or those with new funding sources. Projects that have been identified but do not have funding remain outside of the CIP until those resources can be identified. Year 1 through 5 represent the planned period, but each individual project may have a different start year or project time span. As the process moves forward, the Year 1 CIP projects flow into the proposed budget. Previously funded and carryover projects contained in the current budget will also flow into the 2020 budget. The budget will then include all Year 1 CIP projects, as well as carryover projects, projects adopted mid-year, reappropriations, administrative costs, and all smaller capital improvement projects that did not hit the $50,000 or more threshold used in the CIP. The majority of the CIP document is made up of individual project details, like the example on the slide. Each project has a project number, lists the category, the neighborhood or neighborhoods, the title of the project, the score if it's a scored project, the ward or wards. It lists the funding source and multiple funding sources if it has more than one. Total by year, and then total for the planned period. If the project has previous funding, it lists that also, and then the total estimated project cost for the entire project. And then a brief description of the project. Scoring is used to prioritize projects against various criteria. The highest scored projects are generally considered for inclusion in the CIP. Scoring has recently been expanded to include parks projects, which use a slightly different criteria set. Parks projects include funding from the general fund, lodging tax or TOT, donations, trust funds, and grants. Transportation projects are also being scored, and Total Public Works, through their scoring process, scored more than 298 projects this last year. In the CIP document, is projects totaling over $205 million, 150 projects, 27 funding sources, and 11 categories of infrastructure. The chart on the screen highlights the funding sources. The largest funding sources is utility rates, followed by revenue bonds, and anticipated better utilizing investments to leverage development or build grant, and then all other funding sources. Yes, ma'am.
Just a clarification, the build grants, were those previously the Tiger funds?
That's correct.
Thank you.
This graph highlights the variation in funding source that occurs during each capital improvement plan period. It has a historical look back for the 5-year total by funding source for each plan. For example, the orange section on the bars represent the utility rate funding in each CIP document. It changes quite a bit with each year with the mix of projects and funding sources. This chart shows the CIP funding by the 4 major project groups. The utility projects make up over half of the CIP, followed by transportation, and then small portions for community and municipal facilities. Similar to the funding source variation, The project mix by group changes as well. For example, the Salem Police Station appeared in the fiscal year 2018 through fiscal year 2022 CIP and caused the municipal facilities group to be much larger than normal. Here's a look at the projects by category. In community facilities, it has 39 projects containing historic structures and parks. Municipal facilities, just over 11 million, has 26 projects that are included in airport, buildings, information technology, and parking structures. Transportation, just over 42 million, 29 projects containing streetlights and streets. And then the utilities group with 56 projects containing stormwater, wastewater, and water. This concludes the staff presentation for the proposed capital improvement plan. Representatives from city departments are available to answer any questions after public testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Great presentation and right-sized. Thank you. No. Oh, thank you. So is there anyone present who would like to provide testimony regarding the capital improvement plan? If not, do you have any questions for staff budget committee members? Vice Chair Nordyke.
Yes, I would just like to declare potential conflict of interest owing to the fact that my father and significant other own properties throughout the city.
Thank you.
And I meant to do that earlier. My apologies.
Well done. Thank you. Any other additional questions or statement? Yes, Member Anderson.
As I look through the list of projects.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Could you please use your microphone so we could have you on record? Thank you.
As I look through the list of projects, I don't see any of them touching Ward 6. Is that accurate?
I'm not sure. I'd have to check.
Okay.
There are several projects that impact the whole city, so they're listed as citywide projects.
That are in this book?
That are in this book, yes. Or in the CIP document.
Okay.
So under neighborhood and ward, they would say citywide. Those mostly having to do with the larger systems such as the water and wastewater treatment.
It looks like on page 20, there's a parks item for Fisher Road Park Master Plan and Development that's in Ward 6.
Can I ask a question about a specific project?
You may.
Okay. There's a feasibility study for broadband service into downtown. Is that different than what Comcast or CenturyLink provide?
That's a great question.
So I'm looking, and it looks like we have someone who can come down and answer that from staff. Thank you.
Kristen Rutherford, Urban Development Director. So this is an RFP to look at the market feasibility to provide options to existing service. As we see increased development and demand in our downtown, and as we went through the strategic planning process, we received a lot of input from people in the community asking us to look at bringing broadband and potentially free Wi-Fi into the downtown. So this would be similar service to what is available. It may not be the city providing that service directly, but rather providing the conduit or the fiber that we would lease out to increase competition and help improve service and rates.
And that would only be for the downtown?
Correct. And the reason that it's limited to the downtown is it's funded with the downtown urban renewal revenue, which is limited to that geographic boundary.
And it looks like Member Lewis has a question.
Yeah, and I apologize for not being more prepared, but I believe one of the folks that testified today mentioned that there's only a certain amount of money allocated for the Marine Drive, and it was a portion of the $3.5 million. Now, can you direct me to where we're talking?
So the Marine Drive project you'll find in the budget document and the capital improvements. It's not in the CIP.
It looks like we have staff coming down to answer that directly. Am I right?
No, Josh answered that. It is in the construction budget for this year.
All right.
This coming fiscal year, excuse me.
I was visiting with Ms. Green, so I apologize. Did we get the question answered?
No, well, it's up, I guess it's up to you. If you want to talk about it now, that's fine, or if we wait for the budget discussion, I think it's.
For Marine Drive?
Yeah.
So the monies the money for Marine Drive is already in the capital budget, so I think we can talk about that in a few minutes from now. And all of the bond monies that Mr. Easterly had spoken about are all allocated to projects. There's just a little bit left that is a contingency amount, and we can also talk about that soon.
And Marine Drive is on page 191 in the budget.
Member Anderson.
Thank you. Josh, I just have a general question. As I'm looking at the 5-year forecast going out, it seems in many of them there's a big jump on various projects in fiscal year 2021, and then it goes way down on the other fiscal years. You know, I'm looking specifically at page 8 on the CIP program. It goes from 60 million to 78 to 27 to 19 to 19. Is that accurate, or is that just because we can really forecast easier for the first years?
So the CIP is a planning document. You'll see the projects more formed in year 1 because that is the budget. Years 2 through 5 are going to be more in the planning phase, and they still might shift. So year 2 is going to be closer to the actual budget.
Okay.
That'll be
So
next
what
year.
that implies to me is year 3, year 4, year 5 are going to be a lot more than what we've got planned out here.
Most likely, as more projects are identified.
May I continue?
Please, Member Anderson.
Thanks. Let's see, page 33. I'm looking at page 33 now. What in information technology are the loan proceeds? To whom did we lend money, and how's that coming back?
So I can answer that question.
Okay.
So that's a internal loan
Okay.
for the CAD system for the 911 program. So they're being loaned that for the project, and then they'll pay it back.
Then, where is it? I'm looking now at page 45. There are 2 citywide projects for signal enhancement, and they're both in just the first next fiscal year and the fiscal year after that. And I'm wondering if any of those are related to the downtown congestion task force recommendation about signalization, I don't know, upgrade, coordination, all that sort of stuff.
No, Counselor, those are other signals throughout the community, not those.
Thank you.
All right. So, Member Kaiser, did you have a question or comment for staff?
I do. Thank you. I am curious about sidewalk rehabilitation. I know in the budget book on page 8, it talks about it as an ongoing program, and there's $1.1 million allocated to that. But I'm wondering, how does that fit into the capital improvements projects? How does that work? And then I would like to know, how are we funding that program? Is that from general fund or transportation services fund, or how is that? Where does that come
Counselor, thank you. We have, there are no capital dollars associated with the sidewalk program at this point. At one point, there was some bond money allocated to it. So that leads to the answer to your next question. That program is being funded through our gas tax allocation. So that money is set aside. So it's operating dollars, and they are transportation operating dollars that are being allocated to the sidewalk program.
If I could just ask a quick follow-up question. It's not related to the CIP, but now you've piqued my interest. Just how can sidewalks be funded? What fund sources are available? So this is out of the gas tax?
It can be anything but SDCs.
Okay.
So sidewalks come with, if it's an SDC-funded transportation project, sidewalks come with it, but we can't fund them separately. And we could not fund maintenance with SDCs. But could they be put in a future bond issue? Can we use gas taxes? Can we use the general fund? Can we use local improvement districts? All of that is possible for sidewalks.
All right, thank you.
All right, Member Anderson, thank you.
Following up on that, I presume we could also, if we increase the streetlight fee, could we dedicate some of that money towards sidewalks?
Well, you could. Technically, I would not recommend it because we call it the streetlight fee. So I think we would want to engage the community and speak to the fact that we might want to start funding something other than streetlight operations
And
with
perhaps speak to the fact that streetlights actually shine on sidewalks?
Well, I mean, we can spin it however we need to, yeah.
I'm not sure
Hoy-
that's a spin. I mean, that's what happens.
Thank you, Member Anderson. And Member Hoy.
Thank you. Not a question, but a comment. Page 20, the Fisher Road Park Master Plan is listed in the Nesca neighborhood in Ward 6. It's not. It's in Ward 5, and I'm not sure which neighborhood that is up there.
We'll get it updated. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could just add on to that, actually, there's quite a few neighborhoods that are inaccurate throughout the CIP. I've noticed quite a few, like Brown Road being in Ward 1. It's not in Ward 1. And others.
So it sounds like we want to do some offline work in making that correction with the CIP. Is that necessary moving forward? All right. So we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing. May I have a motion recommend?
Sorry, we weren't quite finished.
Oh.
I still had questions.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Member Teagan.
That's okay. I guess this isn't so much a question, just a comment. We haven't heard the city manager's report on the budget yet, but I think that it's worth noting before we start that considering the health of the general fund, that there's $679,000 in spending of the general fund in the capital improvement plan. It doesn't seem like that amount is unusual. It seems like it's less than it has been in the past, but it's worth noting considering the other things have been proposed cutting out of the general fund. And then I guess the question I do have is just about in the capital improvements tab of the budget book, just a explanation for the increases in the budgets between fiscal year 18 and 19. I mean, I think I have some idea of them, like the police station funding became real in fiscal 19 in a way it wasn't in fiscal 18. But then also maybe an explanation as to the extra capacities facilities fund. All of those seem to have expanded in the last year, and if that has to do with the system development charges, and just an explanation as to the increase.
Yeah, thank you. The extra capacity fund is funded by SDC's systems development charges. Systems development charges are very volatile. From year to year, we might get a lot of money, a little money. So as the fund balance increases, or as we see more development on the horizon, then we allocate more money to projects. So that's why you'll see the volatility from that funding source.
So that I'll follow up. That's a 5 times volatility from last year to this year? Or is there an actual change in the way the funding's coming in?
No, the funding is the same. So it could be that a project then fell into the, what you might be seeing. I don't have last year's CIP
Can I step in just for a second?
Of course.
I think I can be helpful.
Oh, excellent.
Are we looking at page 169?
Yes.
And page 170?
169 and 170.
In the budget
correct.
volume.
Yeah.
So the way this page is oriented, the 2 columns on the left side are actual expenditures. The 2 columns on the right side are the budget for fiscal year 2019 and the budget for fiscal year 2020. So what you have is the difference between the amount that we fully appropriate for capital improvements on the right side of the page as compared to what we actually expended on the left side of the page for those fiscal years. So it says fiscal year 2017 actuals and fiscal year 2018 actuals on the left side, and on the right side, it's fiscal year 2019 budget and fiscal year 2020 proposed budget. So
Right.
we appropriate more than we spend.
So the more complete answer is projects were completed, other projects remain, and that's why the numbers are larger. Thank you, Kelly.
Okay, thanks for the explanation.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Budget
it.
Officer Jacobs and Director Fernandez.
And I'll just, one more thing for the record, my last name is pronounced Tigan.
Tigan, oh.
It's okay.
My apologies.
No one gets it right the first time.
Member Tigan, thank you. And Member Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Fernandez, I have a follow-up on Member Tigan's long eye question about the money from the general fund, the $690,000. I have to say, I looked through this and I was seeing most of it is not general fund, if even any of it, because it comes from utility fund, bonds, all the other good ways we have of getting money to help our capital improvements. What specifically is the $690,000 for? And it looks like maybe Josh can answer that.
So it's in a few different areas. One is in information technology, and then additionally in parks, and that should be the majority of it.
Okay, and I can understand information technology because that's certainly not a capital improvement. What about the parks? I mean, well, some of it is capital improvement, I guess, but a lot of it is you know, system upgrades, which I don't know if that's a capital improvement or not.
It still
Okay,
is.
it is.
So,
having never upgraded my systems, I don't know.
So for parks, part of it is the SPIF grant, the matching funds.
Okay.
For IT, we defined the capital projects as anything over 50,000, and a lot of those hit that threshold.
All right, thank you very much.
And Member Anderson, there's also general funds proposed for building improvements.
Correct, in the buildings category.
Here at the Municipal Civic Center.
I think $250,000 to improve the HVAC in this facility and the roof, which I appreciate. Every time I speak into the microphone, I think it's too hot in here. So.
All right, moving forward, Budget Committee, thank you for these comments. I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing now. And may I have a motion recommending the proposed fiscal year 2020 through 2024 capital improvements plan to the City Council for adoption, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mayor Bennett. I have a motion from Member Bennett. Do I have a second? Second from Member Hoy. Is there any discussion? All right, all those.
I've got some discussion. I think in.
Member Tigan, please, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I just need to get in there before that gavel comes down.
I've got a bumper on it now. You're fine, but I'll go ahead and direct you. Thank you.
I guess I'd like a little bit more information on the priority for spending of the general fund this year on capital improvements. There's not a score associated with the improvements to this facility. The only score of any of the capital improvement fund expenditures from the capital improvement plan from the general fund is the playgrounds, which I appreciate because a dangerous playground could hurt children.
Well, thank you, Member Tigan. If I'm understanding your question correctly, it sounds like you're wanting to see how staff score and dedicate general funds as they move forward in the budget. I believe we should have staff able to answer that question as far as prioritization and process are concerned with the budget. Thank you.
It's a great question. The general fund projects, the IT project, and the roof replacement and HVAC replacement for this building were not scored. They are part of a long list of needs. The IT department actually does strategic planning and planning for infrastructure replacement for our IT systems. And in regard to this building, our Facility Services Division has a very long list of deferred projects where we have not attached any funding to needed repairs to many, many city buildings. And so this is an attempt to begin touching some of the things that need to be done before further degradation of these systems occurs. And I think that I mean, that's probably the extent of my knowledge about this, so I'll need to defer to the city manager or to the Human Resources Director, Mina Hansen, who is also our Facility Services Director, if you have additional questions.
Thank you, Budget Officer Jacobs. Is there any other?
I mean, I guess I would be interested in hearing a little bit more about how much of a priority fixing specifically this facility is.
Great, we can move forward with that, being mindful that we still have the rest of the agenda to cover this evening, so we can always take that information offline or ask for an additional report for the next meeting.
Hi, Mina Hansen, HR Director, Facilities Manager. We have a long list of deferred maintenance, and we categorize things based on the cost of our repairs and the cost of imminent failure. We certainly know in facilities that preventative maintenance is better than large corrective maintenance. With regard to this roof, we're beginning to see water incursion into the membrane. And so the roof needs to be replaced, or we're going to have a catastrophic failure, which will be far more expensive than fixing the roof now. With regard to the HVAC, we have a prime opportunity now with that change to install some energy efficiency. Right now, when we heat or cool this chamber, we have to heat or cool the entire complex because we have one physical plant. Our plan is to install dampening devices so that we can heat or cool just this area, and also to add some fresh air intakes because this chamber has no fresh air intakes at this point. We anticipate receiving Department of Energy grants for those and also seeing some significant energy savings by doing those HVAC changes when we do the roof. It is most economical for us to do those HVAC changes when we do a roof, not to do them later or try to retrofit them, because then we end up seeing leaking occurring at the penetration points on the roof.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Hansen. Member Kaiser.
Thanks. I think it's important that we get a chance to deliberate it a little bit, just because this is the chance we get before we vote on it. So I'm just kind of interested, and Member Tigan's question about, general fund use for these capital expenditures when we do have pressing budget concerns, specifically with the general fund. So I'm looking at investing, what is it, $250,000 in this building, $241,000 this fiscal year in this building for HVAC and roof. And I appreciate where did she go? The testimony you just gave. Thank you for that. I'm just wondering if this year is the right year with the deficit that we're facing with general funds specifically, and looking at cutting programs, youth services, HRAP, all of that. Is there a way we can delay this by a year? I don't know, just throwing it out there, but I do have some concerns about that.
Thank you, Member Kaiser. My immediate thoughts when you were speaking of this were speaking to the catastrophic failure possibility and how that would take more programs and services offline, and looking at that potential risk ratio. Are there additional questions from
Well, I guess
Budget
if I can just
Committee?
respond to that comment. It would be nice if we had a master plan, I guess, for this civic center, really, to know if the investments we're going to make in this coming year are frankly, if they're worth it. I don't know if we have a plan for the Civic Center. I know we have a plan for the library, for seismic retrofitting upgrades. I have not seen a plan for the rest of the Civic Center. So I think, I don't want to say let's not invest in our buildings. We definitely should. I think the timing, to Member Tigan's point, I think the timing is critical, and we have to think about all of those things, especially when we're looking at budget cuts and potentially losing FTE.
Member Member Kaiser, thank you very much for that suggestion. I think you just made the first suggestion for our bike rack this season. If you'd like to add that, are you wanting to add that to bike rack, a possibility that we come back to see about possibly recommending to council at a later date to follow up with a plan for this building, the Civic Center, process for improvement?
Well, as far as a master plan, I don't even know if we have one, so I don't know what the ask necessarily would be there without knowing first from staff what is in the plan, if there is a plan.
So it sounds like you're requesting a report as well, and that, or if someone would be able to speak to it.
I don't know if anyone's able to speak to it tonight, but I don't know if I necessarily need a report per se. Just
Manager Powers, do you?
it's just more of a discussion topic, I guess.
Thank
and
you.
If the committee is not interested in discussing it, then I'll shut up. So.
Thank you, Member Kaiser. Manager Powers? Yes, Member Milton.
Yeah, I just want to express that I'm deeply interested in discussing this more before we go into approving a budget. So, just my opinion.
Thank you. Member Sant.
I would also echo that. I think it's a great call out, and given that we had some testimony here, specifically I refer to the Youth Summit program with Boys and Girls Club, and as well as the Homeless Rental Assistance Program, and DARE was another one. I think that, and so I know we'll get more into that, but I think it's very important that if those are on the quote unquote chopping block, that we are 100% sure that taking money from the general fund for improving a building for the city is a good use of those funds. So.
Member Lewis.
Okay, my curiosity is piqued, and it makes sense to me to be able to have Ms. Hanson come back up and answer a couple questions. One, do we have a plan for the Civic Center? And two, do we have an estimate of how long it is going to be before we have that catastrophic failure? What I heard her say was that we are experiencing leaking right now.
So there has not been a master plan for the Civic Center in a number of years, and it probably needs to be upgraded. The last one, of course, includes the police facility. We do have a group of employees working on what the Civic Center might look like once police moves out, and where we might utilize it and how to make it more user-friendly. That said, we have no money to do a new master plan. We don't have even money for the reallocation of space once police move out. So we're working on it. The last major plan that we had any substance to it, we actually got some students from the University of Oregon to help us with. So it's been a long time. What we do have in facilities is we keep track of the deferred maintenance and how much the cost is of that deferred maintenance, and also then what we're having to put into repairs to offset the damage that's occurring. So when we start hitting that tipping point where the cost of doing repairs is starting to be to where it doesn't make sense to continue to sink money into repairs, because now we've gotten beyond the point where we should have just replaced it because we've put so much money into repairs, that's when we start looking at putting them into the budget to be upgraded or to be repaired. We feel in facilities that it's our responsibility to make sure we maintain the assets. We've certainly seen over time how the escalation of the deferred maintenance becomes more and more expensive for us. And we're very cognizant of using general fund for repairs. And while I realize that we don't have a plan, we do have a plan not to let the water incursion become such that we get dry rot, that we have to replace other structural elements of the building. So that was the decision point we made for putting the roof in the CIP.
Member Bennett.
Thank you, Mina. The last time I saw a plan for this sort of campus, for this specific portion of it, this building was removed. And it has been regularly discussed as sort of a seismic catastrophe waiting to happen here, that this really drags the rest of the building down into the pond. So it would strike me, and now maybe that's too old now to look back on, but that this building is, if in any future planning for this campus, is probably one of the buildings that will go just because of its interaction with the rest of the structure. Is there a repair strategy you could recommend that is far less expensive to deal with the roof issues, the leaking issues without, I mean, do you have an
We
alternative?
we can certainly come back with some other alternatives to replacing the roof. But typically what we see is that if we do those patches, and let me back up and
Yeah.
say, Mayor, you're absolutely right. That report, I think, is over a decade old now.
Yeah.
So a patch job, we may be able to get 5 years out of it, but then what we're looking at is the escalating cost of a new roof in another 5 years if we haven't taken action on replacing the roof at this juncture. And so one of our dilemmas is that as we've continued to defer maintenance, we see that it becomes more and more expensive to do that. And without some commitment to a long-term master plan that involves some serious renovation of the Civic Center, this is kind of where we're at. And the chamber here is used for more than just these meetings. It's used by the courts for overflow. It's used at other times. So we certainly can get back to you with other alternatives.
The only other factoid I'd be interested in would be how much a master plan, just what would be your estimate of the cost of doing some master planning then to understand what the future looks like? What are we looking at over the next 5 to 10 years? 10 years ago, we thought we knew where we were going. Now, where are we going?
Right. I don't have that number off the top of my head. I'm sure we
I'd
could
just be
get some number
curious.
for you.
Okay, thank you.
Member Anderson.
Thank you. Kind of following up on Mayor Bennett's comments. It seems to me like there's two issues of this $250,000. One of them is our roof is leaking, we need a new roof. The other is the HVAC is not as efficient as it could be because we have to heat the whole plant to heat or cool to keep this. So I'm curious as to if you had to prioritize those, so maybe we're not spending $250,000, we're fixing the roof and not fixing the HVAC. Is that a possibility?
It certainly is a possibility, but it's an extremely lost opportunity. And we believe the HVAC upgrades will be easily recovered in a DOE, Department of Energy payback, as well as the energy efficiency. So the largest share of that is the roofing.
Okay, and the efficiency is if you're up there on the roof, you can, that's where the HVAC
Right.
stuff is located, okay.
Ms. Hanson, I have a question about the long-term comp plan in relation to the master plan for this building. So redoing the comprehensive plan in no way can encompass or take into account some of the work needed in this building, is that right?
I'm not certain what you're asking me.
We have budgeted, nope. I see shaking heads,
I
just
think-
double checking.
I think the comprehensive plan update that you're referring to, Chairperson Cook, our Salem is really on a much longer time horizon than the needs that we have, deferred maintenance needs that we're really, certainly a plan would be helpful for guidance, but we have a long list of deferred maintenance and we're trying to get at the most urgent of those needs. And while we have enough need for the general fund to have a recurring commitment to the capital improvement plan, by their definition, the capital improvement plan is really non-recurring expenditures funded by, at least right now for the general fund, non-recurring revenue. So I would point that out to the budget committee as far as making choices between budgetary needs, which there are many.
Thank you, Manager Powers. Further discussion? Member Alsick.
I would just ask one more thing, is the long-term, as the mayor was pointing out, the potential of having this go away at some point. Is there a plan for another space for the current uses of this space to go somewhere else? If so, is that something that we could look into doing sooner before the roof collapses in on us, rather than if that's in the time horizon that we could push this repair off? So,
Certainly, we could consider that as the department directors, and I think also some discussion with the finance committee. There are many needs that the city has, many needs that will come back. Streets and bridges, fire apparatus. This Civic Center complex tends to fall toward the bottom of that list, where the more urgent needs, the needs expressed by the community, such as streets and bridges, to city council tend to rise to the top of the list. And the Civic Center, particularly with the recent public support and council support for the police station, has tended to fall to the bottom of the list, which then exaggerates the problem with the deferred maintenance items growing both in cost and in number. And Mina and our facility staff, with some outside consulting expertise and internal support from our engineers, really are triaging those needs, looking at opportunities. Member Hoy asked me, is this any way connected to a recent change we made with the library and the Civic Center complex, where we did the exact same thing that Mina's talking about, where we had an opportunity to save some dollars by including a change in the compressor for the Civic Center as part of the library retrofit project. And I think Mina is advising we look at that same opportunity for this roof, if the Budget Committee and ultimately City Council believes the roof is a justified expenditure, given the other constraints and demands on the general fund, which have been brought up already and which will be brought up again later tonight and certainly over the course of the next 2 Budget Committee meetings.
Member McCoy.
This is an interesting discussion. It sounds to me like the committee's saying, do you have a standard way of going about putting one of these repairs, since it comes out of the general fund, on the, in the plan? And I'm starting not getting an answer. I feel like we're not getting a straight answer. And I guess from what I'm hearing you say is, we don't put anything on here to come out of the general fund unless it's egregious and about ready to fail. Or it does feel like your cooler thing from a couple years ago that was $800,000. Is that what you're saying? I mean, we're looking for some rationale moving forward here, and I think we're not getting one.
So we grade all of the systems based on their failure rate, their age, how much money we've put into them, and we have every system, mechanical, envelope, electrical, in that matrix. And many of our systems, including the roof here, are in the extremely poor, so we grade them A through F. And this particular roof is failing. There are items that are graded below the F, but that we didn't include because they're too expensive. And a couple of examples, the slab out here is $8.1 million. When we first proposed fixing it 10 years ago, it was $2.1 million. So that's how it builds. We can't come up with that money. So we do grade them. We grade them by how much we've had to put into them, how old they are, how much corrective maintenance has been put onto them. And so there's an entire system by which we evaluate them and rank them, and we take the top ones in the ranking to fix.
Thank you. Member McCoy.
Again, so this is basically the worst thing on your whole list, is basically what I'm hearing. And if you had enough money, you could go up that list and still end up with a whole list of things that are failing in extremely poor and Ds and Fs, way above what we're doing. So this is, you picked the most egregious one
That we could afford.
that you could afford. Okay.
Truly a terrifying answer, but thank you. Member Milton.
So I know it sounds like a decade ago before I was ever here, that there's plans possibly for this building not to be here anymore or have some type of upgrades. So when I think about that, knowing that there's still that possibility, how long does this roof that we're looking at proposal, what's the lifespan of this new roof?
The new roof, we would expect to get at least 20 years out of a new roof.
So, okay, knowing that we don't have 20 years and we're not sure if we're going to even be here in 20 years, I struggle personally going, okay, we're paying for something that we might not even have here in 20 years from now.
I don't know how to buy a new roof that gives you less than a 20-year life.
Yeah.
I think
That's the cheapest roof we can find.
I think it's nice to remember, if you don't have a roof, you don't really have a building, with respect to people that have buildings without roofs.
I get that, but I'm sitting here going, and again, I don't know the roof issue here, but I know there's Band-Aids and there's, what's going on. When you hear that, we're at the letter F for this roof, right? So when you hear that, it just makes me, and you made it seem like there's letters that go below F, right?
There are some that are I would say, we give them an F, but they are below F, but we just can't fix them.
Okay, so I just was trying to sit here going, is there a possibility where we can maintain repair without things getting worse? If that's a possibility, is more my question.
And I guess that's kind of my response to the question about how do we grade them. So the facilities crew does a great job patching and holding things together with what used to be referred to as baling wire. We do a really good job at that. We only bring forward the things where we've reached the tipping point in the corrective maintenance to where it's no longer advisable to continue to suck for corrective maintenance money into it, because now we're putting so much in to keep it going that fixing it would be more economical.
Thank you. Member Nanki, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two questions. For one question and a long comment. In regards to the DOE funding, is that actually included in the budget number and then we will be reimbursed from that, or what is its actual value?
I don't know the actual value, but I know that we didn't include it because we don't know until we submit the design what they'll give us.
Thanks. And then just in regards to comments, in the early days of the Budget Committee, there was a big board that would roll in on everything that failed that year that we never got around to. It's not the sexy or exciting pieces as far as infrastructure maintenance across the entire system, not just the general fund. And it always takes the last seat. And facilities, even during construction of a manufacturing facility, is the one who gets cut short at the end of construction when they run low on dollars. And when you look at the cost of replacing it down the line, similar to this slab out here, we're not investing in those things that are going to cost the community the most, and essentially that will be a giant bond measure because this place will fall down. I envision this actual building to still be here 20 years from now.
Yes.
It's not going to be pulled down. We're library, police station, we got a whole bunch of other stuff to do before we get back to the Civic Center. And if I recall right in the last conversations I have, this can actually be seismically reinforced. So we need to take care of this. It's going to stay here for the life of the roof. We know how fast everything moves in government. We saw how long it took for the police to actually get out of the basement. Out of the old jail. So.
Thank you, Member Nanki. Member Anderson, Member Lewis, and then Member Leung.
You know, it seems to me that we've got a real Gordian knot here. And I look at this and say, okay, if we say the $250,000 we might be spending on the roof, instead of spending it on physical things, we spend it on people. And yeah, that's exactly right, Brad. So we say we really want to put more money into HARP. We want to put more money into Sobering Center or any of the youth programs, which I think is most interesting to me. So we put it in for 1 year, and then next year, what do we do? Because that $250,000, it's gone. I mean, we're going to have a recurring expense, and so you have to balance that against. We spend $250,000 now, and we've got 20 years. We don't have to spend another $250,000. So, you know, I came in wondering about this, but I'm moving toward, and I'm glad you raised it, Paul, because I'm moving toward saying maybe we need to spend it on this because then we're covered for 20 years as opposed to raise people's hopes in these other people programs that, yeah, we can do it this year, and then next year we're not going to do it, and we've spent $250,000 and we have nothing to show for it except a year more of helping people. But
thank you, Member Anderson, with that eye towards sustainability. I appreciate it. And Member Lewis.
Yeah, real quick, because I think the conversation's going in the right direction, but to the longevity of the building, as somebody who has spent a number of nights for the last 15 years in this building, it goes by in a heartbeat. I can agree with Councilor Nanke. 20 years from now, this building will be here, and my guess is we'll be doing the same thing, hopefully not. Yeah.
Member Leung?
Thank you. So my question has to do, if there was a seismic upgrade for the Civic Center, is there a certain time limit already established for that? And if not, is that something that could be, I guess, put in a parking lot? I'm not sure if that's where it would go under.
Oh, you mean in the bike rack?
Bike rack, thank you.
No worries. Yes, Officer Hanson.
We know that there is no plan for a seismic upgrade. We would have to have some serious funding source or a bond measure. We estimate it would be about $15 to $20 million to do that. We did have a company come look, the same firm that did the Courthouse Square upgrades after that event. And they think that they could use the same technology to perhaps reinforce the building, but we would still need somewhere around $15 to $20 million to do it.
Point of clarification, how were they involved in Courthouse Square?
They were the outside general contractor that did they call it carbon fiber wrapping, where they can reinforce concrete pillars in place.
Thank you for that clarification. Member Kaiser.
Thank you, Chair Cook. So thanks for the conversation, the discussion. I think it was needed. I would be really interested, and I don't know if it's the Budget Committee or the Council, but it sounds to me like we need a civic center strategy and perhaps a City of Salem owned building strategy. Because it sounds like you have a list, but it's graded by degradation, essentially. It's not based on the strategic asset of the building per se. It could be a small little shop that's like a sub F score, but is that the most important thing to, put your capital investments in? So I guess maybe this is a council issue to come back to, but it feels like that we're gonna have to set some policy around this stuff, or at least look at it, because I've never seen this list. I don't know what condition our buildings are at. I don't even know all of the buildings that the city owns. I think it's curious that we'll make a one-time expenditure of $241,000 on this building, but that's not to say that the programs that are on the chopping block haven't been running, because they have. It's not like they just started this year. They've been running for years. So to say that you're just gonna do it for 1 year makes it sound like it's just one-time investment in something, and it's not. What you're really looking at is cutting those programs, spending the money that would go to those programs for a one-time expenditure. And I'm not necessarily arguing against it. I'm just saying that it's different than I think it perhaps has been portrayed as far as an ongoing program. But I think it would be important for us to have a strategy, or at least to look at all of those factors so we know what we're getting into. Because I think residents are expecting their tax dollars to go to services and not necessarily to capital improvements in city facilities when we keep cutting services. Because eventually we'll have a building we can have council in, but we won't necessarily have programs that existed even last year. So I think we just have to be very careful with especially the general fund as opposed to other funds for these types of activities.
Thank you, Member Kaiser. I really appreciate you bringing forward those comments, and it sounds like you also made a second suggestion for our bike rack.
Yeah, and I don't know how to do about that, but it's just seeming more and more that we, either as the Budget Committee or perhaps as City Council, need to look at a strategy for making capital improvements to city-owned resources.
Well, getting that inventory down, definitely. And this Budget Committee can also, through that bike rack, make suggestions for council to move forward on policy. We still have other items we need to get to this evening. Thank you, Member Mayor Bennett. Thank you. So I do want to remind the Budget Committee that when we move forward with this motion, we can still come back and revisit, as Member Jacobs said. So please feel free to write down these questions. We can revisit them. Even though we're closing or passing this, we can still come back to it. That being said, I had a motion and a second. So would you like me to reread the motion? Reread the motion? No? All right. All those in favor of improving of fiscal year 2020 through fiscal year 2024 capital improvement plan to the City Council for adoption, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying no. Motion approved. Moving on to the special orders of business, we have a presentation from the proposed fiscal year 2020 from City Manager Powers, delivering the budget message. Manager Powers?
Thank you, Chairperson Cook. For the sake of the time of the evening and also the fact that we have provided to the Budget Committee and to the community a budget message that goes into much greater detail, and certainly the budget book provides a very good summary in detail on the city's $627 million operation. My message this evening is going to be very brief. Tonight it is our privilege to present the proposed fiscal year 2020 budget. The upcoming fiscal year is a pivotal year, and I think the conversation, the discussion that the Budget Committee just had is a very good example of that. The city's ability to fiscally sustain some services is at risk. Overall, the city's fiscal health is good. Why this contradiction? Well, as I mentioned, the city is a $627 million enterprise. Most of the city's funds are healthy. You saw that through the capital improvement plan. Our utility funds are in very good health. We're able to fund improvements to our utility systems. Outside bond rating agencies continue to give us very high ratings for our utility systems and our capacity to fund improvements. We have other dedicated funding sources that are also very healthy. Our building and safety fund is in very good shape because of the building activity of the past 5-6 years. And the public has shown their support for the city through approving bonds for the police station and library seismic retrofit. The challenge is in the general fund. The general fund is not fiscally healthy. The $148.6 million fund that houses police, fire, parks, library, municipal court, general governmental services is not sustainable. We are spending one-time revenues, our working capital to support recurring expenditures. Fiscal year 2020 can be the year to begin pivoting the general fund toward a more solid fiscal foundation. My proposed budget, through the work of the department heads and the budget office, minimizes impacts on services and programs, while beginning, I believe, that alignment that is necessary between revenues and expenditures. The proposed fiscal year 2020 budget right-sizes or eliminates 4 programs and makes reductions in department operating budgets for the general fund of $2.7 million. None of these recommendations are easy. I understand all have impacts. I attempted to minimize those impacts on services and on the community. All of the recommendations in the proposed budget were done in consultation with the department directors. You have an opportunity beginning tonight to review my proposal and provide a recommendation to City Council. Over the 3 meetings that have been outlined in your packet, you will be provided an overview and have the opportunity to go into whatever detail you would like regarding the proposed expenditures. City Council will adopt the city's budget on June 24th. The city, the staff, many of them are here this evening, are committed to continuing to improve, looking at our operations and across the organization for opportunities to do things more efficiently and to continue to provide high-quality services that our community expects. The city has fine-tuned and improved services to our community. We have reduced costs. We have been looking and using technology in new ways. We've become more energy efficient, We charge for services that make sense, and we're engaging volunteers and foundations to help support our services. The budget, the general fund budget, cannot be balanced through efficiencies. The efforts of the city's budget team and departments are why you have a proposed budget that continues progress on the community's priorities as articulated through the council's strategic plan and policy agenda, while recognizing the need for budget alignment. My thanks to them, and my thanks to you. As again, the discussion that just occurred is an excellent example of the challenges and the difficulties that are facing us, and thank you for your willingness to help us with that challenge. And that concludes my budget message for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the city manager this evening? Member Anderson.
I had a quick question about the cut to the youth development program. Is the youth development program in reference to SCEF?
The youth development program includes several programs, including the one that you just mentioned. We can go into that in detail right now if the Budget Committee would like, or certainly circle back to that, and staff are prepared to answer questions regarding what's all involved, what's all included with our youth development program. So whatever the pleasure of the Budget Committee is.
Actually, if I could be indulged for just a moment, I have a lot of material to cover with you this evening, and we are going to cover the result area where that program was previously included, so where it is being eliminated from. So at that point, I think we would probably ask the director from that department to speak to your question, if we could, please. Will that work? Then I'll get started.
Okay.
So, and I'm just really going to get right at it because I have an awful lot of material to cover with you. But if I go too fast, please, tell me to slow down. It may or may not happen, but by all means, let's try. So again, this year, the budget is formed around broadly framed outcomes for the community, or result areas. Last year, prior to the city's first year of priority-based budgeting implementation, we called them service areas, and you will undoubtedly find service areas still referenced as I've struggled to make that transition. The two phrases, result area and service area, mean exactly the same thing. The result areas help to answer the question of what the city is in the business of doing and why. This evening, we will be reviewing the result areas of safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure, natural environment stewardship, and welcoming and livable community. The remaining three result areas, strong and diverse economy, safe community, and good governance, will be reviewed during the next two meetings. The budget display converts thousands of line item entries into programs and aligns those programs with results the community cares about. The goal of priority-based budgeting is to ensure resources are being applied to the highest and best use to achieve those results. In the budget, each result area is set off by a tab with the result area name and an icon, and the icons appear on the left side of the screen. To allow us to form up a budget publication, each program has been assigned to a home result area. Each tab section lists across multiple pages all of the programs assigned to that home result area. In this budget, there are no year-over-year comparisons at the program level, as implementation of priority-based budgeting really changed how we defined and detailed programs. However, on each program page, there is an indicator, a check mark, that denotes if a program received a score within a particular result area. In the example on this slide, which is an excerpt from the safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure result area, a check mark means a program received a score in the result area noted by the icon at the top of the column. Again, we have assigned programs to a home result area to form a budget publication, but a program can score in more than one result area. Next year, following the second year of a 2-year implementation plan for priority-based budgeting, this display will likely include a year-over-year comparison, as well as more information about how programs scored within a result area. I mentioned earlier that the program pages did not include a year-over-year comparison. There are, however, about 100 pages of year-over-year comparisons in the financial summary section beginning on page 215. But please don't turn there because we're going to keep with the result area. Development of this budget was guided by the council's strategic plan, which provides our mission, vision, and values, defines expectations of the council and community framed within the policy priorities of vision for growth and development, affordable housing, homelessness and social services, critical infrastructure, public transportation, environmental action, and sustainable services. The annual policy agenda, which is informed by input from residents and interested groups, transitions from goals to actions that can be supported in the upcoming fiscal budget. The policy agenda relies on continuous feedback through resident satisfaction surveys, city boards and commissions, neighborhood associations, and opportunities for public testimony at city council and budget committee meetings. The role of the budget committee is integral to this annual cycle as the committee receives the budget proposal from the city manager, which you're doing right now, provides those opportunities for community feedback at each committee meeting, which we did extensively earlier, sets the property tax levy each year, and makes a budget recommendation to the City Council. And now we're moving on to our result areas. Safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure is the first of the 6 result areas we'll review over the 3 committee meetings. As the first, it will also serve as a real-time example for navigating the result area budget displays. Safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure begins on page 115 of the budget publication. A safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure is defined as an integrated system of streets, bridges, and sidewalks, civic buildings, technology, and utility systems. To achieve this result, the city optimizes the use of city assets, manages water, stormwater, and wastewater safely and responsibly, supports a balanced transportation system that reflects effective land use and reduces congestion, designs, constructs, and maintains an interconnected and multimodal transportation network that is safe, accessible, and sustainable, and plans, operates, and maintains infrastructure networks. This result area has a total budget of $129.2 million. Approximately 31.4% of expenditures allocated to result areas are dedicated toward a safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure. 272.87 full-time equivalent positions are assigned under the result area and include the following 5.20 full-time equivalent position additions as part of the budget proposal. None of these additions are funded by the general fund. A maintenance operator position in the streets maintenance section to support pavement maintenance and emergency response. The position is partially funded through a conversion of seasonal dollars. In planning and development, a permit tech position and a program coordinator position were added mid-year to support customer service and permitting and plan review related to increased development in the community. A .80 FTE clerk dispatcher position will be increased to full-time or 1.0 FTE to add capacity for coverage of 24-hour per day dispatch center operations. And 2 water treatment operators were added to the budget in mid-fiscal year 2019 to assist with water treatment plant operations and prepare for additional treatment processes to be implemented when the ozone facility is constructed. Programs assigned to this result area are managed by the Public Works Department. Road and sidewalk maintenance, traffic engineering and permitting, sewer collection system maintenance, water quality monitoring, traffic signal maintenance, watershed monitoring, and traffic control are just a few of the more than 50 programs comprising this result area. The program pages for safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure provide further breakdown of services and positions. In addition, the capital improvements budget, which can be found beginning on page 169, intersects with the safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure result area. Funds from operational budgets support capital projects for transportation, utilities, parks, and municipal and community facilities. In addition, staff supported in operational budgets and included in this result area serve as project managers for all of the city's capital improvements. With this direct relationship between the result area and the capital improvements budget, my review will include initiatives and projects from both. Treatment and delivery of safe drinking water from Guerin Island Treatment Facility to customers in Salem, Turner, Suburban East Salem Water District, and Orchard Heights Water District will be further enhanced with a significant project to develop a long-term solution for the removal of toxins and other pathogens. Ozone is one of the strongest disinfectants to treat water. The treatment produces no taste or odor, and no ozone is left in the water after treatment. The fiscal year 2020 budget has $19.2 million for the design and construction of an ozone treatment facility, flood protection barriers, and integration of new and existing operation control systems at Guerin Island. The capital improvement plan includes an additional $35 million for the project through fiscal year 2022. The fiscal year 2020 budget also includes $1.2 million for the design and construction of improvements to the Woodmancy Park Aquifer Storage and Recovery System to remove residual chlorine before injection into the aquifer, and also improve treatment of water pumped from the aquifer before it's mixed with water in the distribution system. Also, work continues on the Boone Road Water Pump Station, which is budgeted at $3.2 million in fiscal year 2020 and includes building expansion, pump upgrade, electrical upgrades, and an emergency generator for backup power. Projects to relieve vehicular congestion, improve street conditions, and enhance safety include design and construction of street and intersection improvements on Division Street Northeast from Commercial to High Streets adjacent to the new police station in Ward 1. Continuation of the street widening improvements on Brown Road from San Francisco Street to Sunnyview Road in Ward 6 with an appropriation of $4.17 million. Also continuing in this budget with an appropriation of $2.28 million is the construction of a 7-foot extension of Fisher Road Northeast from Market Street. The budget proposal has more than $6 million of intersection and signal improvements and installation of new streetlights in areas with deficient lighting, including design and right-of-way or easement acquisition is assigned $760,000. Additionally, $300,000 is dedicated to remove and replace downtown core area lighting with new LED-powered decorative streetlights. Bicycle and pedestrian safety projects in the budget proposal include $294,070 for improvements in Ward 7 to the Liberty Elementary School pedestrian crossing with a new median pedestrian island and rapid flashing beacons, and similar safety improvements with a project at Commercial Street and Roy Vaughan Avenue in Ward 3 initiated in fiscal year 2019 and finishing up in fiscal year 2020. A total of $1.89 million is dedicated in the proposed budget for an ongoing bicycle lanes improvement project on Commercial Street at Oxford Street to Winding Way in Wards 2 and 3. The capital improvements budget appropriates $1.1 million with funding available from the 2008 Streets and Bridges Bond to support sidewalk reconstruction on Rosemont Avenue in West Salem. The annual sidewalk program is maintained at the current service level and includes a crew working on access to places of public accommodation and identified Americans with Disability Act preferred routes, as well as small mobile teams providing select spot repairs in neighborhoods throughout the community. The capital improvements budget includes many projects in the categories of community and municipal facilities that support the needed infrastructure for services with a nexus to another of the 6 result areas. Some examples in the budget proposal include Salem's municipal airports operations are featured in the result area of strong and diverse economy. The capital improvements budget includes a total of $2.63 million, primarily Federal Aviation Administration funding for the second phase of Taxiway C rehabilitation as well as rehab of the commercial parking ramp at the airport. Information technology programs can be found in the result area of good governance, but the infrastructure to support those services is very much a part of the definition for this result area. The capital improvements budget includes $192,650 for a virtual server storage array replacement, which is used to operate 170 unique virtual servers. 911 emergency call taking and dispatch services are a safe community result area set of programs. Replacement of the computer-aided dispatch and mobile data system, which is essential to tracking emergency information and the activity of responding police and fire personnel, is included in the capital improvements budget at $2 million. Whoop, too far. As Josh Eggleston noted in his CIP presentation, there are more than 24 funding sources for capital improvement projects. General obligation bonds, where voters approve additional taxation to support infrastructure projects, provide funding for transportation system improvements, fire emergency response equipment, and new construction of or upgrades to existing buildings that house city services. The fiscal year 2020 debt service for Salem's current general obligation bonds equals $15.77 million. It's included in this result area because, of course, the focus here is creating a safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure with these general bond obligation dollars. My review focused on the new budget proposal. The At Your Service section, beginning on page 131, highlights initiatives and projects currently underway or completed during fiscal year 2019. An At Your Service section is included with each result area, and I invite you to enjoy reading about the remarkable scope of regular, ongoing work effort and product, special projects, and new initiatives across the organization represented in these pages. That concludes my presentation of the Safe, Reliable, and Efficient Infrastructure Result Area Budget. Department representatives are available to respond to your questions.
Thank you, Officer Jacobs. Is there, let's see here. Is there anyone present who would like to provide testimony to items not on the agenda this evening? No, we're still in question?
Yeah, it's an opportunity for the Budget Committee to ask questions of staff.
I thought we already went to that. Okay. Councilor Lewis, or Member Lewis, please.
Thank you. I guess digging into this idea of what can we use streetlight fees for, and can we use them for sidewalks? The thing that draws my attention is the replacement of the decorative lighting downtown with decorative LED lighting. And I agree with this, and I know it's our goal, but is the lighting situation in our downtown as severe as some other areas? So I guess my question is, what is, and I can't find the specific dollar amount for just that project, the downtown project. So could someone tell me what that amount is?
I believe it's $300,000, but before I commit to that number, I'm going to find it. And I'd more than welcome someone from Public Works, if they have that number, to jump to the microphone. I know they're watching me move my sheets. So I think that number can be found on page 190, Project 4. This is in the capital, behind your capital improvements tab in your budget book. So it's page 190. It's $300,000 for downtown decorative streetlight replacement.
And Counselor, with respect to your question, as you know, we completed the relamping of all of the streetlights in the community. So this is both a relamping and a replacement of the pedestrian lighting downtown that would provide not just an improvement to the poles and the lights, et cetera, but it would also provide better lighting downtown to a significant pedestrian area. So it's just sort of the next project that comes up. We also have a significant amount of money laid out. Once we pay the electric bill and once we pay the debt service, then what we said what we promised council and the community when the streetlight fee was adopted is that we would start replacing poles. So there's some of that in here, and also installing new poles in areas that need lighting. And we went through and did a comprehensive look at the community, basically asked community members to tell us where they wanted lighting, and there's a ranked list that we select projects from the top of the list and from the middle of the list, so that the onesies twosies also get built. So this is just another project.
Thank you, Director Fernandez. Member Hoy, did you have an additional question? No. Member Mayor Bennett?
I'm not sure, Kelly or Peter. I'm interested if there is inside this budget an opportunity fund that if we had a specific proposal, and I'm looking at a flashing crosswalk on 15th Street where we've had 2 women hit, and we have the potential now for North Salem students crossing to Barrick Field, whether there'd be a place we could go for funding for that.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where that is in the budget book, but there is a program that we have funded in the streets budget for safe crossings.
Yeah.
Where is it? Hold on just a second, Mayor. Getting the right page here so that we can speak intelligently. So in page 193,
okay,
there is item number 25 shows that there is 24 pedestrian safety crossings. There's $125,000 allocated, and the list for that is created, but it hasn't been ranked yet. So we'll be coming back to council actually in the next few weeks to show you. Is that right, Julie? To show you the list of ranked projects to start spending that money and what the list is. That project, Market at 15th, is on the list.
Great,
what we don't have yet is it number 1 or is it number 5 or what is it? So it will come. I can't promise you that it will come this year in this budget, but it's definitely identified. It's definitely on the list.
Is there also, just one other, something I hear a lot about, I'm sure other counselors do as well, is potholes?
Yes.
Is there a spot in here for potholes? Or?
It's in the operations budget. We try and address potholes as soon as we hear about them. They're harder to do in the rainy season, so we tend to cold patch them as fast as we can and then come back and do better repairs when the weather's better, so the asphalt
appear
sticks.
In the rainy season.
I'm sorry?
It's sort of like they appear in the rainy
They absolutely appear in the it's rain and cold that creates them. So we do address them. And there isn't a pothole program that I can point to, but the money and the operations are funded for doing that. It's one of the basic functions that we do.
Okay. Okay, good. I think I'd like at some point to kind of understand how to point people toward that, whether it's a program or a staff member, or how to deal with that in terms of, like we do with graffiti. It is just a very common contact point for me. I don't know about other counselors, but I hear quite a bit about potholes. So
503-588-6311, Public Works Dispatch, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As soon as somebody sees a pothole, they need to call it in. And by calling dispatch, a work order is generated so we can track it, and potholes get addressed almost immediately.
Thank you.
Just an additional question with the technology portion of that. I know a lot of cities have moved towards the app method for reporting this. That's not in this general plan. That's not included as part of the technology upgrade. Is that right?
We're not quite ready to do that yet.
All right. Thank you. Member Anderson.
Over on Locust Road by the Oregon School for the Deaf, it's the Oregon School for the Deaf as well as the Eagle Charter School, which is a public charter school. There is no school zone. So cars zip by there as young children are crossing the street, and School for the Deaf children are going there. And there's a railroad track there, and cars race by. And at the Eagle Charter School Board meeting, a lot of parents have continually voiced concern about this. And is there anything on the city's radar to eventually make that a school zone?
Yes, our city traffic engineers have worked with the School for the Deaf and with the charter school to address those issues. I know we've installed signage out there. I don't know, I think we have talked about creating a school zone with the flashing lights, but they're not, I don't think we've gone to that level. But
Member Anderson, we can certainly follow up and provide a
lot of work has been done.
detailed response to you on the status of those communications with the two schools.
Thank you.
Member Kaiser.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to sidewalks again. It's my thing. So I hear more about sidewalks than I do potholes. I wish we would respond to sidewalks as quickly as we respond to potholes. That'd be great. I know we have different funding considerations for that. So what I'm interested though is the sidewalk rehabilitation money that was allocated last year. How did we spend that all? I know in years previous we had an issue with actually getting people hired to do the work, and curious about how it went last year. I've seen more crews out there doing that kind of, fixed sidewalk panel replacements.
Marc Bechtel's going to take that one.
Marc Bechtel, Public Works Operations Manager. Yes, Councilor, we've been very busy fixing sidewalks in the last year. We have multiple teams that go out and do that. One is the sidewalk rehabilitation team. They've been concentrating in the Nen neighborhood area in the Court Street Historic District. They're almost done. I think they have a block or two to go left on that. Their main emphasis is areas of critical ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act access. And so they're going to tend to be more on collector streets and arterial streets and business districts and schools and that area. We have another crew that goes out and does spot repairs in each of the neighborhood association areas. And each neighborhood association's been working with staff to select like their top 5 worst locations. The crew goes out, does those 5 locations, goes to the next neighborhood, then we go back to the neighborhood again, ask what their next 5 locations, worst locations is. That crew is very busy. We have a grind and patch team that goes out and just grinds and patches very quickly on things. We also have another concrete crew that works on the trench patching for concrete when we make utility cuts and water meter repairs, things like that. So we are doing as much concrete work as we have ever done in recent history.
Mr. Bechtel, thank you. Just to clarify, that same number, the 6311, can also be used to report sidewalk inconsistencies or inefficiencies. Is that correct?
Correct. And I would ask a pothole, we will fix a pothole within 1 business day, or if it comes in over the weekend, the very next business day after the weekend. But it only takes like minutes to fix a pothole with cold patch and maybe an hour, permanently. Sidewalks take considerably longer. We have to, excavate the sidewalk. We have to deal with tree roots. We have to, rebase, reform, pour, finish, put the landscaping back. And so I too wish that we could fix sidewalks as fast because my life would be a lot easier. But it does take a little bit more time to do the sidewalk repair. So
If I could follow up, Madam Chair.
Please, Member Kater.
Thank you. So did we use the money allocated last year in the budget for sidewalks? Did we expend all of that then?
I believe we expended all or most of it, yes.
All right. And then my next question is would we have resources or capacity, I guess, to do more as far as sidewalk rehabilitation goes? Or are we just there as far as having the right amount of people and equipment and to accomplish as much as we can, or could we do more with the people and staff we have right now?
We are doing, probably as much as we can right now. We have struggled to find qualified concrete finishers. It's a very hot labor market, continues to be. And so we do from time to time have vacancies, but we have had a better time this year than we had last year staffing the crews.
I've got one more follow-up question, and that is there a list? Do you keep a list of kind of the next project? Because that's something I get asked a lot about is what areas is going next? Or how do I get on the list? Like as far as you were describing, going out to the neighborhood associations, having them prioritize areas. Is that publicized any place or?
It's not up on the web or anything like that, but we do keep, our concrete supervisor keeps track of the projects that have been identified and which ones he's going to next.
Okay.
But it's not up on the web.
That might be perhaps something though that we could get maybe more visible to the.
We can certainly take a look at that, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Well, and certainly if I may quickly, our overall sidewalk plan is still operating under the concentric circles that has been shared with council over the years. I think the flying squad, the emergency repairs are the types of repairs that Marc is referring to.
Well, we have been working under the concentric circle plan for years. The compliance with the federal ADA rules have complicated the concentric circle plan. And so really we're doing more corridors than circles. But the flying squad, the reason we have what we call the flying squad or that priority repair team is because our larger sidewalk team is more deliberate. They go and they do large areas or a neighborhood and hit those areas in a bigger way. The flying squad can go out and hit those worst repairs that the neighborhood associations help us identify, hit them, and move on. One of the difficulties we have is we come in, we fix a really bad sidewalk location, and all the neighbors go, oh, I got one too. And while you're here, could you fix this one and this one and this one and this one? And then that would bog us down. And so one of the reasons why I think the counselors get a lot of calls is you probably hear, well, they fixed the sidewalk across the street, but they didn't get to mine because we moved on to the next worst one. So that is a challenge.
Well, if I may, I think that's where the education piece could be really helpful, especially in my wards and the wards that have sidewalks that are 100 years old. Just knowing exactly what you said there, so that we can help communicate that message back, would be really helpful.
Sure, we can certainly do a better job of publicizing that. Yes.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Member Kaiser. Member Hoy, Member Anderson, and then Member Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to follow up, Mr. Bechtel, before you step away. The program that you're contacting the neighborhood associations and asking for their top sidewalk repairs, I'm pretty diligent about attending all of my neighborhoods in my ward. I've never heard them discuss that. How long has that been happening? I'm really happy to hear about it, but I've never heard about it before.
Let me bring down Bruce Hildebrandt. He supervises the concrete supervisor, and he can tell you how many neighborhoods Brandon Klukas has been to.
Well, I've been to some of Brandon's presentations, but that hasn't been part of our conversation that I've been at.
Well, if you would indulge me, I'll let Bruce maybe give you a better answer to that question.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Chair, and distinguished members of the Budget Review Committee. I'm Bruce Hildebrandt. I'm currently the Streets Operations Manager, and I cover streets and sidewalks and now signs and sweeping is my new section I'm now overseeing. So kind of come full circle. That's where I started my career at the city. Sidewalks are so complicated. Let me give you an example. We get about 6 pothole repair requests in a day. We fix them the next day. We get 6 sidewalk repair requests. It takes us a month to fix them, depending on their complexity, especially if it involves significant trees and significant work. So I want to kind of set that standard of response down. You know, in the past, since we started this program in 2007 with the first council and when we first proposed the concentric plan for the city to get after these sidewalks, you know, we were looking at an assessment of decades of deferred maintenance on these sidewalks. So I had to talk council and let us go and inspect and inventory. We didn't even know where we had sidewalks. We did that. We came up with 146,000 defects in our sidewalks, of which 132,000 defects required repair, and that was just in between the years of 2008 and 2010 when we did that assessment. 9 years later, we have many more locations needing repair because the sidewalks continue to deteriorate.
Bruce, I think the question was what outreach has been done to the neighborhood associations.
Right. So what we've done is we've had to modify our program, and I think maybe a little misunderstanding here is we have not asked the neighborhood associations. We discussed that item. The problem we had was we have so many old requests for repair. We're talking going back 30 years. So when we started looking at these neighborhoods and looking how to prioritize repairs in each of these neighborhoods, we went back to our old records. We looked for ADA complaints. We looked for age of complaint. We looked for severity of the damage at that location. And we also get all kinds of communication from these neighborhood associations every day. We receive 3 to 5 phone calls a day all over the community of locations requesting repair.
If I could interrupt, I was just
Sure.
asking about your actual communication with the neighborhood associations.
Right.
What I'm understanding you to say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that actually isn't happening.
No, we do get from some neighborhood associations, they have submitted letters to us with locations.
But you're not reaching out to a neighborhood association, doing the top 5, then circling back again next time once you get through all the neighborhood associations? And
No,
doing
we
that
have
next-
not reached out to the neighborhood associations like that, sir.
Thank you.
Other questions?
All right,
Yeah, I've got another one on sidewalks, and I don't know if this is for you, Mr. Hildebrandt, or Mr. Bechtel. I have had a number of people come up to me and approach me and say, hey, my sidewalk's in rotten shape. I understand that the city has trouble. They understand the situation we're in with all the miles and the way we're doing it. So they say, can I go ahead and fix it myself? And have the city inspect it, or, you know, some sort of something where I hire somebody to take care of my sidewalk, and then the city gets it after they're done. Is that a possibility?
Yes, sir, it certainly is. And in fact, to encourage homeowners' participation in replacing sidewalks, our director, Mr. Fernandez, has graciously offered to waive the permit fee for that very purpose.
Okay.
There is some confusion about reimbursement. We do not have program money to reimburse the homeowners for the work. We just will waive the permit fees. We will provide the inspection as necessary for public infrastructure. If they choose to do the repair or replacement out of pocket, we will provide all those other services.
Well, that would be something I think that could also be publicized better, put on the website or something else, because I know there are people who would be willing to expend that, especially if their understanding is that once the city comes in and does it, it's going to be their responsibility from that point onward. Yeah, so, you know, I can think of, I don't know, over the years, maybe a half dozen people who have said that to me. So I would love to see that publicized, and maybe it could start happening, especially the waiver of the fee and inspected and everything else.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Lewis?
Just a real quick follow-up to that. Is it still possible for neighborhoods to create a district and do like an entire street out of pocket?
The answer is absolutely yes.
Okay. That's good enough. And then just the only comment I would say is that in the case of a sidewalk being disrupted by street trees, then no, the neighbors don't have the right to chop those trees down, do whatever they do with the roots. That would have to be done through the city.
Right, so what the code language says is that once we repair the sidewalk, it reverts to the owner's responsibility unless it is upset by a street tree.
Yeah. And one follow-up, since you're there, Peter, the Marine Drive question, I think I get this now. In the capital improvement budget, there is $3,582,660 designated for a specific project, which is Marine Drive from Glen Creek to Cameo. That's the way it stands now. It's my understanding that staff needs more specific direction from, I would assume, the city council, and that's what you're waiting for.
Councilor Lewis, certainly if the Budget Committee wanted to take action on Marine Drive, the Budget Committee can do that. My recommendation is that, as was discussed Monday night at Council, we'll be coming back to Council specifically on property acquisition. And again, unless the Budget Committee wants to change the budget by removing Marine Drive or somehow changing what Council has approved, I would suggest that's a Council consideration that will be coming to you. I promise Council it will be coming to you first or second meeting in May.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Member Barker.
Excuse me, I have a couple questions. I had the same question that Councilor Hoy had, but another question. When you said public input was sought for lights and where they were needed, how was that done?
We put out, this was several years ago now, I believe we put out a request, and people just simply came in and said, we would like streetlights, and that's still possible. So whenever we get either a neighbor or a group of neighbors that want streetlights on their street that don't exist, we rank it based on criteria that was prior approved, and then it gets put on the list, and year after year we install them.
And then a follow-up question. I've noticed that street cleaners are out there at 11 and 12 o'clock at night. And another situation when the leaves fall in the fall and you don't see the street cleaners out during the week, but then you see them out on the weekends. Are those people that are working outside of regular hours, are they on regular time or are they all on overtime?
It can be both. So during the street sweepers operate, not the same human being, but the machines are out virtually 24 hours a day, and they're on a schedule. During leaf season, then we have a whole program, and it's all based on where leaves fall. So older neighborhoods with larger trees get more treatment during that time of year, and sometimes we'll run people on overtime, and that's budgeted so that we can address those issues.
Thank you.
All right, we still have a few orders of special business, so I'd like to invite Officer Jacobs back down for item C on the agenda.
Thank you very much. So we are moving on to the result area of natural environment stewardship. The responsibilities of natural environment stewardship are defined as protecting natural resources, including healthy streams, and the Willamette River, and reducing the impact from the built environment and city operations on the environment. To achieve this result, the city reduces the carbon footprint of city operations and conserves energy, protects and enhances watersheds, natural areas, and natural resources, plans and designs the city's growth to minimize emissions and other environmental impacts, provides education to protect and preserve the natural environment, and mitigates and abates threats to the environment. The result area, natural environment stewardship, begins on page 71 of the budget publication. The budget proposes approximately $18 million to be dedicated toward this result area in fiscal year 2020, representing about 4.4% of the total for all result areas and including 89.95 full-time equivalent positions. Position changes in the result area include the addition of one full-time equivalent wastewater treatment facility maintenance operator to address ongoing maintenance needs at Willow Lake Water Pollution Control Facility and operations at the wet weather facility on River Road. Programs for this result area are managed by the Public Works Department and focus on environmental compliance, monitoring, and education. The program pages for natural environment stewardship provide further breakdown of services and positions. And just as an aside, I would invite you to read that entire section. Staff did a fabulous job of really describing to you what the city's efforts are in this area. So it's really kind of fun reading. The city's Willow Lake Water Pollution Control Facility serves an area of more than 60 square miles, including the communities of Salem, Turner, and Kaiser, and unincorporated areas of East Salem. East of Salem. This result area includes the operation of the treatment facility, stormwater management, erosion prevention and sediment control, North Sandiam watershed monitoring, the city's early flood warning system, stormwater quality monitoring, sewer flow monitoring, the Clean Streams Initiative, and the Youth Environmental Education Program. In this budget, the project to upgrade the Willow Lake Water Pollution Control Facility's innovative and clean power generation system that creates electricity from the wastewater treatment process continues with a $6.2 million appropriation. The cogeneration facility has powered a portion of the wastewater treatment facility for nearly 30 years and is at the end of its useful life. The city was awarded $6.59 million in grants and energy incentives through the PGE Renewable Energy Funds, Energy Trust of Oregon, and the Department of Energy to upgrade the power generated from 650 kilowatts to 1.1 megawatts, enough to power 50% of the Willow Lake facility. In addition to saving about $300,000 a year in power costs, the project will maximize the ability to use available biogas to produce clean, reliable, and renewable energy. It will also use heat generated by the cogeneration process rather than natural gas to heat the water treatment facility while reducing the city's reliance on non-renewable power sources. This upgrade provides environmental and economic value to the community and the city's ratepayers. In the area of environmental compliance through stormwater management, the amount of acreage of stream corridors, oak savannas, wetlands, and mitigation projects operated and managed by the Natural Areas Program is anticipated to increase by 50% to nearly 300 acres over the next year. Environmental monitoring through the city's flood warning system will be enhanced with an expansion of the physical network of rain and stream gauges that support the collection of in-stream flow data to calibrate a flood forecast model. The benefits of this program include a 25% reduction in flood insurance rates, data to support future structural flood control options, and a better understanding of the impacts of climate change. Believe it or not, that concludes my presentation of the Natural Environment Stewardship Result Area. Department representatives are available to respond to your questions.
Thank you, Budget Officer Jacobs. Questions from the council? Member Mayor Bennett.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor. I just want, one of the pieces of testimony from Lauren, I just lost his last name, but it was during the discussion of a climate action plan, was regarding tree planting. And I just wanted to understand, because my recollection is we have a pretty robust tree planting program, like $186,000 invested, and And the suggestion was 2 for 1, for 1 cut, 1 tree cut, 2 planted. I want to understand where we are, because it seems like we're planting a lot of trees right now.
Thank you, Mayor. We are planting a lot of trees. We have several programs that we're quite proud of. The first, of course, is our relationship with Friends of Trees. Friends of Trees is under contract to the Public Works Department, has been for a number of years, to plant trees across the city. Councilor Hoy, I think, attends every single planting. Thank you, Councilor Hoy. And that's both an education and a public outreach program, as well as a tree planting program. We then, what I lovingly call the industrial planting, and that's, we started allocating $100,000 a year last year. Our plan is to do it for at least 5 years. There's another $100,000 in the budget this year, and that is just, that's a contract that we have with a company called Treecology, and they not only plant trees, but they take care of them for 3 years. So we have them guaranteed for 3 years. You see some of the plantings on Front Street. You see some new trees. That was part of the plantings, and there's plantings all over the place. And then every transportation project that we undertake comes with trees. So every time we improve a street, date comes automatically with street trees. So I think the council was provided with a report a couple of meetings ago that talked about the trees, and I think we planted somewhere on the order of 800 trees, 1,000 trees last year, all said and done. So we'll continue that process.
Do you feel we're meeting the challenge Lauren made to us? I thought it was an interesting 2 for 1.
I think we are at about recalling the report, about 1.5 to 1 in terms of trees that we manage.
Yeah.
Then there's always the issue of private cuttings and what that effect is. But we're planting just as fast as we can.
Okay. Well, 2 to 1 sounds like a pretty reasonable number.
That's a great goal.
Great goal. Okay. Thank you.
Member Anderson.
And this may be for Director Wright. I'd like to question about what Kate and Eddie and Soren talked about. That is, what are we doing to implement the climate action plan? I looked through the natural environment stewardship and I couldn't find any specific expenditures, so I'm guessing and hoping that we're covering that with the staff that we have, but I know that we also have some consultants who at least have been talking to people. So what's in the budget for next year to see we move beyond the greenhouse gas inventory and trying to start to figure out how we're going to use that information to help the city?
Yes, to that question, Norman Wright, Community Development Director. We have a part of a long-range project here, as many of you are familiar, is our Salem comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is in its phase 1 right now, and for those that may recall, phase 1 involves that greenhouse gas inventory that everyone has made reference to in the comments earlier today. That inventory is giving us a baseline of information that we need to then be able to even consider some possibilities of a plan that could then lead to eventual implementation later. Implementation right now is taking place in the sort of measures and annual programs that Director Fernandez just spoke about, for example, with trees. But the sort of implementation that I think the community is interested in as it relates to climate action, as it would be built upon the data that we are already gathering and are sharing on May 8th from the greenhouse gas inventory, that sort of action requires the sort of transportation planning, the sort of system planning, the sort of future growth management planning that is all part of our phase 2 of the comp plan, which we intend to begin as soon as July of this year. So to your question about implementation and a budget for implementations outside of those already being conducted by, say, Public Works or by our own tree protection regulations or other such regulations, those sort of implementations are large scale. They are directly related to the built environment, and thus they are going to be critically informed by all the visioning that would occur as a part of, again, phase 2 of the comprehensive plan beginning in July. To try to attempt at a guess of any other implementation or even budgetary investments prior to that visioning, I'm afraid would be premature.
So what you're saying is that, yes, we have all this planning going on, we're collecting data, we're getting information together, but we will not be able to start implementing any of this stuff until the next budget cycle?
Perhaps the next budget cycle, it may be 2 budget cycles, because really the implementation has to be informed on a vision for how the city is going to grow in the future, because everything that the community is mentioning as far as these climate impacts that relate to any sort of aspect that the city can affect, every single component of that has to do with future growth, the future pattern of that growth, and the way that's going to be managed. And that is, again, part and parcel of a visioning process that may take a year and could lead to proposals next year, but it may take 2 years.
Well, 2 responses to that. One, I think that is something that should be publicized and discussed with the community. And 2, why are we just concerned about future growth? What about the growth we've got right now that is not environmentally effective and efficient? I mean, that's not future, that's here today. So what do we do about that?
Well, I would again go back to some of the actions taken even by this council, whether it be for plastic bags and concerns surrounding that, or the actions taken by a variety of other departments when it comes to programs. And there's, of course, only so much capacity that we have to handle any of those actions with, again, the bandwidth that we have today. Our direction from, I would say at least last year, has been, let's incorporate climate action into this broader concern, this broader opportunity that we have to create the best possible change that we can through this dialogue with the community, through future growth. As far as current actions, again, I'm not the best person to speak to that, but I can at least connect at least 3 or 4 dots of things that we do already. Is it enough? I leave that to the council, of course, to decide, but there's certainly some correlations there with what we do today.
Well, Mr. Wright, I would be very interested in some suggestions that the consultants and your team could come up with things we can do now, because so far the suggestions have come directly from the council. And I would say that both Public Works and Community Development are well aware of the direction the council wants to go. And I think it would behoove you to say, okay, yes, we're visioning, we're going out to the future, we're looking at how we're going to grow, but what can we do right now? And you're right, the plastic bag ban was one of those. I was looking at a styrofoam ban, but I may not have to do that now because the state is at least halfway through enacting a styrofoam ban. So there are other things that could be done, and I would appreciate any help we can get from the staff to follow out on the city's policy directives. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Lewis.
Well, I have one specific question I want to make sure that is in the budget, and that is when we had the presentation from the consultant about the greenhouse gas levels, I think they specifically said that they had set up the measuring so that the city could pick it up and do it on an annual basis easily and relatively inexpensively. And I want to make sure that we are going to be doing that each year.
We don't have the capacity for that at this point in time. We have all the infrastructure there, of course, with the reporting in place, but we can't commit to that currently.
Thank you. And Mayor Member Bennett.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on Councilor Anderson's question. Do you have then inside of the Our Salem project some sort of climate scoring or gas emissions scoring or something where you'll be able to, as part of the outcome at least and along the way, provide us with kind of working from this baseline? And I think that's what we were kind of anticipating. We'd begin to see progress on some of these. met with PGE recently on green tariff here in Salem to put us on a full city, on a full 100% renewable program, except for our fossil fuel emissions, because they're really hard to get at, and there is a strategy to get there, and I want to know if you're kind of building that in, like electric vehicle charging stations along our streets, and that whole range of things that can be done that begin to result in the kind of potential scoring we could do. I just worry that it might sit out there as sort of an idea, but unrefined as you do the planning, which is exactly what happened here 20, 40 years ago now, when they built a comprehensive plan without a meaningful transportation component. And we've got these roadblocks along our way, whether it's at the bridges or it's up on Liberty and Commercial, and I'd hate to see that happen in this planning process. I think I'd like to kind of hear more in the future, if not in the budget cycle, about how you're going to be scoring, and I don't even know how to describe it. I don't know what the language looks like.
You're actually very close to what we already are intending and are looking to do with this comprehensive plan effort. Again, May 8th, that's going to be our next public workshop on what we have found in phase 1, and what you'll find in that is, again, these very, very discrete, specific measures for all of these impacts. And then from there, you'll get something of a scoring that will occur from both the community as well as from our best practices and measures that we can find. And ultimately what this leads to is if the community deems, and it seems pretty likely that they will, that this is a major important factor of any particular vision we have moving forward, those scores will likely lead to targets, and those targets will likely inform actions of the sorts that you're describing, Mayor, that could then be part, maybe not of a formal climate plan, but certainly actions to take to meet those targets in the future.
Just doing that kind of planning is an action. I mean, I think if the public were aware that this is informing our planning decisions over the next few years, that would look a lot like a climate action plan, along with additional pieces being added, whether it's trees or plastic bags or styrofoam or green tariffs. You know, but knowing there's a fundamental discussion underway.
Yes, sir, and I appreciate you saying all that. You said it better than I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Bennett. Member Hoy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Following up on your response to Councilor Lewis, what would it take for you to have the capacity to do that measurement?
It would take additional staff.
How many?
It's hard to say, but it depends particularly on looking back at what we have as an inventory, what we have as a database, and the maintenance necessary for it. I wouldn't want to give an off-the-cuff estimate here and now, but it is definitely work that we cannot do with our current resources.
I would ask that you come back with that maybe at our next meeting if possible. It just seems like we've made an investment, and to just drop it now doesn't make any sense. It seems like we've just tossed that money away. And so I would be interested to hear what it would take to keep that work going.
And Director Wright, I would also add to Councilor Hoy's request to include the COGS work in this as well, to see how that would factor in for cost ratio and potential partnership rather than FTE. Thank you. Member Anderson.
I endorse everything that my fellow members have said, and I'm drawing an analogy to criminal law. You have a conspiracy where people get together and talk about things, but it doesn't become a conspiracy until there is some overt act taken toward carrying out the conspiracy that you have agreed to do. And I make no allusions to what's happening at the top of our country now, but that's the same thing here. We can talk all we want about here's the plan, here's everything else, but we got to start taking some steps toward it. And I'm hearing from you that you are, but it would be great to have other people other than the people in this room here. This is a wild hair that came to me right now while I was thinking about what we can do and how we can do it and how we can affect what is happening with the city right now. We got a huge roof up there. It's flat. It's facing south. There's no trees in front of it. We just, and I know Councilor Hoy he's done it, we're in the process of doing it. We're putting up solar panels on our house, and we're getting a loan from PGE at a very good rate, and we're going to reduce our electricity consumption by quite a lot. So I'd be much more willing to talk about spending $250,000 plus whatever loan we could get when you're up there working on the HVAC system to put in solar panels on top of that, and then maybe you would have to use the HVAC system less to start with because you're storing up in batteries the solar power, and you don't have to. You can use it when the sun doesn't shine. I'm making too many allusions to our national situation, but why can't we do that? Why can't we look into that? Why can't we talk to PGE and say, hey, we're going to be fixing our roof and doing the HVAC. We're going to be up there. Why can't you come in and put solar panels all across the roof of the Civic Center?
Member Anderson, I'm feeling so many feelings right now, and it's very exciting to have this conversation, and I want to encourage all of us to enjoy this public process. However, we are moving forward with this process, and to add another analogy to it, I'm flight control, and we're rapidly running out of fuel for some of the aircraft that needs to come down. So I still want people to feel like they've got a chance to make comments. We want to be public through this, and there will be additional time. There will be additional opportunity to ask questions and address staff. But that being said, I know Councilor Kaser is going to sum this up and move us on. Councilor Kaser.
Well, thanks for the setup. No, just really quick to Director Wright. I think it would be helpful for both the greenhouse gas inventory and the environmental action plan if there was a timeline when you come back to council to report, just as far as saying like, hey, we're looking at this year of doing it or whatever it might be, just to be a little bit more definitive.
Yes.
Thank you, Director Wright. Thank you, Member Kaser. So moving on to result area. Oh, my goodness. Member Chirac. Yes.
Thank you. I do have a question on this same result area, different topic, if we're ready to move on. My question deals with the outdoor school program on page 81. It's proposed as a new program. Staff would be running it out at Minto Brown Park. It sounds wonderful, but my question is this city funds used, or is staff coordinating with the school district to use state lottery funds, which were recently carved out for outdoor school?
What an excellent question. I know we have a staff that can help to answer that, and I'm just going to wait to see who stands up. It's not a good time to excuse yourself. It looks like Director Fernandez will be able to speak to that.
We have so many programs, and I think you've kind of stumped me a little bit, Raj Chirac. I believe this is an outreach program that the utility funds. We fund education programs, first because it's the right thing to do, and second because our stormwater permits require it as part of the outreach. So I believe this is our funding. I do not believe that we work through the schools. We provide the staffing, and we work through the schools to get the students and coordinate with teachers. But I forget exactly what your question was with respect to.
Well, there are state lottery.
Member Chirac, if you could use the microphone, please. Thank you.
There are state lottery funds available for outdoor schools. I'm pretty sure it has to be run through school districts.
Right.
I mean, a private contractor can't just start an outdoor school. And it just seems like that would be a good alternative funding source to accomplish the very same thing of this work out at Minto, which sounds great, but without using city funds, even dedicated utility funds, which would free them up for other city utility needs.
We will look into that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Hold on. Member Tigan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Fernandez, I just, I guess, I'm not crazy. The water crisis was last summer, right?
Algal bloom, but yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. I guess I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for identifying your team and really across the entire city, identifying a major project, and I guess this isn't it is in the capital improvement plan, but it also covers a couple of the result areas that we've spoken about. Identifying a solution to that in a way that utilizes the funds that were available to the city. At $56 million, it seems like it's the largest project in the capital improvement plan. I guess my question is, so thank you as a parent of small children, and that was quite an ordeal last year, and I really feel like the city managed it remarkably. And the idea that we'll handle it long term is a great service to the city, but could you identify how much of this is directly associated with mitigating the algal bloom or the potential for it?
Yeah, so we have because we have some immediate projects, some projects that we're addressing the issue immediately, but with respect to the long-term projects, the long-term capital projects, it is the bulk of the money is being spent on constructing the ozone contact chamber and the telemetry that goes with it, et cetera. That has been, the prime mover of that was the algal blooms. However, there are a lot of changes. You know, we've talked a lot about climate change and tonight. We don't know what else is going to happen up in the watershed. We don't own that watershed. You know, so what changes are going to happen as the water warms? There's a highway through there, tankers overturn periodically. You know, there's any number of other issues. And our slow sand filters, which have been great to us for 80 years, are highly reliant, and it's the best way, the most economical, most environmentally sensitive way to treat drinking water. However, they are highly reliant on the source water being as clean and as pure as possible. So as these changes are happening, you know, we just felt that we needed to make the investment in the ozone tank. And then ozone is a known agent that will address, you know, Wilsonville uses it to treat Willamette River water. So that gives you an indication that it will treat everything and give our filters a real lead in then just polishing the water at the end. Now, real quickly, because I know I know there's many planes up in the air, so we are also installing groundwater wells as a secondary source of water up at the plant. And then we are also working on improving our Woodmansee aquifer storage and recovery wells so that we can both pump in and out more water and distribute it out further into the system than just in that neighborhood. It's usually the only neighborhood that is served by it. So the totality of the $50 million that we're spending, of ratepayer money that we're spending, incorporates all of those projects.
Director Fernandez, thank you. And just to clarify, we do own water rights in the North Santiam in that watershed area. I think what was implied was that we don't own an entire surrounding bubble of that area to
Correct.
secure every piece of that.
We own the flow. We don't own the land around it, the watershed.
But we have the oldest water rights in that area, and there are a lot of people benefiting from that, so thank you. And just to pass on that congratulations as well, and if anyone on Budget Committee hasn't had a chance to see the presentation, I know it's going out to the neighborhood associations. I believe Marc Bechtel is doing that as well. I just encourage everyone to become familiar with that and the process the city has set up.
Thank you.
Member Lewis.
Real quick, the only thing that wasn't mentioned about all this is the $52 million project that you're going to be doing is going to not necessitate any rate increases for the customers.
Well, that's any additional rate increases. So we have been on a steady, you know, our goal is to hold steady at 3% a year. And we were able to move some capital projects around, to tighten the belts a little bit, and be able to continue to do that. Now, that's our goal. I can't promise that. You know, the next time we do a future rate proposal, but the financial staff always comes to me and says, "Are you sure you just want to do 3?" And I said, yes. And then they look at me grumpily, and then we make it work. But at some point, I'm going to have to say, gosh, we need to recommend a little more. But that's what, certainly for the last time we did a rate proposal, and hopefully, at least in the short term, we can continue to do that.
Yeah, my point is, there are a lot of cities, if they were to get into this situation, they'd have to go find the money to do it.
Yes, yes, and I thank the council for being so conscientious about slow and steady rate increases. That's an important philosophy, and it really saved our bacon with this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Fernandez. If I can direct our members' attention to page 151 and call Budget Officer Jacobs to the front, please, for the presentation. Thank you.
So, the final result area this evening, welcoming and livable community. A welcoming community is one where neighborhoods are safe and clean, with a mix of quality housing, with access to parks, recreation, historic and cultural resources, and the arts. To achieve the result of a welcoming and livable community, the city supports a long-term vision for future growth and development with the community, addresses homelessness, poverty, and other human service needs by leveraging resources and partnerships, creates and maintains parks, trails, and open spaces to offer activities that connect, benefit, and reflect our community, supports the arts, historically significant buildings and sites, and community events, and enhances multi-generational community enrichment and meaningful volunteer and neighborhood engagement. As Chair Cook noted, welcoming and livable community begins on page 151 of the budget publication. Approximately $26.77 million of the proposed fiscal year 2020 budget and 124.40 full-time equivalent positions are assigned under the area of a welcoming and livable community. The budget for this result area equals approximately 6.5% of the total appropriated for all result areas. Position changes in this result area include the following: discontinuation of the Youth Development Program and the elimination of one full-time equivalent outreach education coordinator position, elimination of a vacant full-time planner 2 position, and elimination of 2 vacant library assistant positions totaling 1.25 FTE. Additionally, a vacant staff assistant position in the Neighborhood Enhancement Division is transferred to the municipal court and repurposed as a court specialist. And I failed to advance my slides. Programs in this result area are managed by multiple city departments and include planning for the future growth of Salem and reviewing development plans and land use proposals, offering access to a physical and electronic collection and multi-generational programming at Salem Public Library, helping homeless individuals with housing and other services, maintaining and operating more than 2,200 acres of parkland and 227 pieces of playground equipment, welcoming an average of 854 daily attendees to Center 50 Plus, and allocating federal funds to assist low-income individuals and families and promote new business and self-sufficiency. Program pages for the result area provide further breakdown of services and positions. In mid-fiscal year 2020, work is scheduled to begin on the Salem Public Library's renovation. This big project will employ a design-build team experienced in library design and construction. The structural seismic retrofit will require the temporary relocation of library services through project completion, which is anticipated for summer of 2021. The various programs supporting the city's efforts to enforce nuisance, housing, and property maintenance codes received a boost in fiscal year 2019 with a grant from the Self-Insurance Risk Fund to initiate a pilot project to begin abating some of the most dangerous derelict properties in Salem. The Blight to Bright program's success in its first year provides funding to reimburse the startup grant during fiscal year 2020 and continue to work on converting blighted properties to developable parcels. The proposed budget continues to fund the Our Salem project, as has been previously noted this evening, to provide a foundation for updating the city's comprehensive plan. Approximately $200,000 remains from the original appropriation for this project. The first phase, accomplished during the current fiscal year, provided for a review of existing plans related to development and an assessment of current conditions and growth trends for Salem. This work will support the next phase of community visioning. The Homeless Rental Assistance Program continues to be supported in the fiscal year 2020 budget, but at a lesser amount. The original grant amount for this program is lowered from $1.4 million to $700,000 to better align the program with available housing options. Assistance under the program will continue to include 12 months of rental assistance, funding for security deposits and other basic needs, and intensive case management to help remove the initial barriers to housing. The fiscal year 2020 budget proposal also continues funding for the homeless coordinator position in partnership with the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments at $45,000. The proposed budget for the city programs that rely on federal community development block grant and home investment partnership funding to promote small business creation and expansion, provide rental assistance to low-income members of the community, and fund social services agencies to help prevent homelessness is included in this result area. The available funding in fiscal year 2020 is $5.3 million and represents a 4% increase over the current fiscal year. In addition, the general fund continues to support $400,000 for social services grants that help local nonprofit providers offer needed services and leverage other funding sources. Parks master planning efforts continue in this budget with the Fairview Community Park design in Ward 3, Gear Community Park update in Ward 2, a plan for Bush's Pasture Park, also in Ward 2, and work on several neighborhood park master plans. New parks development and construction projects proposed for fiscal year 2020 include Secor Park facilities in Ward 4 and new restroom facilities on the north end of Riverfront Park, with sources of funding shared between Park System Development Charge revenues and a pending grant from the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department for a total of $800,000. In addition, $1.27 million is appropriated to begin development of the 4-acre parcel on the south end of Riverfront Park in preparation for the new amphitheater. This phase of the project, which is funded with Park System Development Charge revenues, includes site grading, utility infrastructure, additional parking, and other related parks improvements. Transient occupancy tax funding supports 2 projects continuing in fiscal year 2020, which were created in mid-fiscal year 2019. $476,000 is scheduled to be used for a complete rehabilitation of the forecourt tennis facilities at Orchard Heights Park, and $75,000 will be used to replace the bleachers at Wallace Marine Park softball complex. And speaking of softball, the city will host a national 18A USA Fast Pitch Tournament this summer. That concludes my presentation of the Welcoming and Livable Community Result Area Budget. Department representatives are available to respond to your questions.
Thank you, Budget Officer Jacobs. Member Hoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is regarding the ATRAP program. I wanted to follow up on the testimony we heard earlier from Linnell Wilcox. She mentioned that we stopped accepting referrals in November, and I was hoping to fact check that to determine, is that true?
I did not have the opportunity to fact check that.
Can answer that question.
Hi, yes, I'll explain my understanding of that. So right now, there are 45 people that are enrolled but unhoused that are on the waiting list. There are an additional 15 that are in the queue waiting to go through the process of being enrolled. Given the housing supply, there are individuals that have been assessed through Arches that have not yet been moved into the pipeline because of just the number of people that caseworkers can manage. So it's you have to think of it as sort of that pipeline that they need to be moving people into units before they can accept more and start the enrollment process. So people are continuing to be assessed, they're continuing to go on the list, but they're not moving through the actual enrollment process until people are moving into housing.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Member Sand.
Thank you. For those that have been through the program is this a 2-year? Has this been going for 2 years or 1 year? This program, 2. So have we seen the success that? So it was quoted the 3 times less to house people than not, obviously, with homelessness. Are we seeing those numbers with those that have come through this program? The metrics that were originally set, are we meeting them?
The original goal was to be housing 100 of the hardest to house individuals on an annual basis. During the first year, that goal was not reached, in part because this is a brand new program. It takes time to develop the program, to bring on the staff, to get them trained, to get the property owners in line. To date, we have placed about 153 individuals. There are sort of in that pipeline that I mentioned, about 200 individuals. So we would need about 200 more units in order to house all of those individuals that are currently assessed and either enrolled or in the waiting line to get enrolled in the program. The attrition rate has been about 22%. Some of that is due to eviction. Some of it is due to just other life changes. We've had individuals that have passed away. And then the ultimate goal is for individuals to graduate out of the HRAP program and move on to vouchers to be more self-sustaining. And we've had 51 individuals that have moved on to vouchers.
Just 1 second, Member Hoy, and then back to Member Son for a follow-up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was mentioned earlier that the city could consider an RFP or some sort of process to increase the supply of rental properties available to this program. Is that a realistic option? Have you considered that? Have you looked at other things to increase that supply?
There's a lot of outreach that is occurring, not through an RFP. It's much more personal outreach, and programs like this are very relationship-based. The clients that go through this program require a lot of case management, and so as you are increasing the number of units, you also have the bandwidth of the service providers, and there are only so many clients that they can manage at a time. So it's two-part. It's the relationship building and managing the relationships with the landlords and building trust. And if you are if you're having too many individuals managed by any individual case manager, you're going to start not being able to respond as well, and that could be harmful to the trust that's needed in the rental community.
Thank you. Would you characterize the bottleneck, the primary bottleneck, as case managers or rental properties?
It's both. It's both.
Thank you.
Member Sond?
Thank you. Have we quantified the cost savings? So somebody who is successfully enrolled in the program and makes it through the year, then as opposed to someone that didn't. Have we quantified that for those that have been through it?
We have not, and I'm not sure how the city alone, without significant effort and expense, could, because the cost impacts are not just to city services, they're to county services, they're to hospital services.
Director Rutherford, those services are still ongoing as well and overwhelmed, is my understanding. So it's not as if they would cease to operate when this program's in place. It's nearly meant to serve the need that's going unmet. Is that correct in my understanding?
Could you restate your question again, please?
Homelessness is not a city problem. It's a community problem. Council initiated the Homeless Rental Assistance Program to do our part, the city's part, to help with the homelessness problem. But as Director Rutherford said, really the direct costs, the direct savings are being realized by others, whether those systems are overwhelmed and there's no significant decrease in those systems. We don't operate a hospital. We don't operate drug and alcohol treatment. We don't operate mental health. Our police officers, there may be some benefit. They're responding to fewer homeless on the streets because they're in housing, not at a magnitude, though, that would allow reductions in our downtown enforcement team. So it's, as Director Rutherford said, it is. It hasn't been a priority for us to measure the impacts directly for the city of the Homeless Rental Assistance Program. It's a program that is intended to help make progress on Council's priority, strategic plan priority of addressing affordable housing and homelessness.
Thank you, Manager Powers. Member Anderson.
Thank you. I certainly agree with the city manager's comments, and we've had this discussion before. The city can, one way to view it is we're moving into the social services area, and that's not our role in the governmental system we have. It doesn't belong to the city. So we're already taking steps above and beyond by saying we're going to house the homeless, and things trail along behind that. And my original question was going to be, is this the time to talk about the sobering center or not? But I'm going to talk about it anyway, because one of the things.
Member Anderson, if I can stop you just so we can move one tiny item along on the agenda. The next point of discussion will be committee discussions and an opportunity for Budget Committee to discuss any issues or concerns regarding agenda items or items not on the agenda.
I'll just say very quickly that the same things that the city manager talked about, if you read his report, the sobering center issue is we don't have any partners, and they're the people we're saving the money. You know, the hospital and other agencies, but they're happy to save the money on that end, but whether they want to contribute to us doing it or not, that's another question.
Member Anderson, not to get too budget wonky on you, I believe the sobering center is under Safe Communities. So that'll be the next Budget Committee meeting. We'll be going through police and fire.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Kaser.
Thank you. I have a question about the $45,000 from general fund for the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments Homeless Initiative Program Coordinator position. It was my understanding that position's vacant and hasn't been filled, and it was my understanding also that we were not going to continue allocating money towards that position.
So the position currently is vacant. There was a failed recruitment. A decision was made to continue some of that work under a contract rather than with an employee. In follow-on to the work session that we had here earlier this week and looking at establishing a local continuum of care, there would continue to be resources that would be needed to support the positions to operate a local continuum.
Okay, so this $45,000 would go towards that.
It would carry forward to the research of that process of establishing the local continuum and the staffing of that.
Okay, so was that, just so clear, was the money that we allocated last year towards the consultant that it was assessing the continuum of care and becoming our own, breaking off from Rock and becoming our own? That's what that money went towards.
In part, it funded the position through December when the person that was in that position left. And then there was an intern that was brought on board and a contract that was entered into to continue that work.
And do we know if that position is going to be filled permanently, or is it going to be continue a project basis type?
So I would think that if a decision was made to move forward with establishing the local continuum, then there would be a recruitment for permanent people to staff probably 2 positions.
And the Mid-Willamette Homeless Initiative would go away. It would evolve into that continuum of care.
Member Sund.
I just wanted to follow up. While I understand that the cost savings is not the city's burden in totality, that there are some, but the majority of it is really the community at large and healthcare providers and all that. Given that this is what I would consider somewhat of a hot topic because it's on the block, and we're not having the discussion of whether to do this program. We've already done it, right? So the city kind of already, got into the space of social service a bit by allowing this program to be funded, and so, when I think about then my community and I see the homeless problem and how we're addressing it, albeit we have to make cuts somewhere if we're going to reduce the funding. You mentioned 153 people and 200 on the waiting list, somewhere around there. So clearly there's a need. So we could probably all identify. We know there's a need, and we know that this program works, and there are multiple stakeholders. So the city's in a unique position to use that data to then to leverage the data to make a value proposition. Then who are the stakeholders that would value the most from that? And the community being one, but others that where can that funding come from? Because I would imagine we can't continue to make our way down that list, cutting the program in half. So if we had data, maybe it's not our job, we're not in the job of social services, but what data did we get? What can we sort of package to say, here's the success? Is there anything else that we can do through partnerships that would allow the program to continue in some fashion? I mean, with the fully funded to kind of get through that list.
Yeah, if I could speak to that, by reducing the budget allocation by half, that does not correlate to placing half the amount of people. What it does is it brings it into alignment with the capacity that we have both in the housing market and with the case management. Okay, so we would continue to be housing people at the same pace with the reduced budget allocation. There are other partners that we're also talking with. There may be some federal funding through Arches that they would be able to bring to the table, and some case management services as well.
Thank you, Director Rutherford. I appreciate Member Sun's comments as far as making sure that we're maintaining that commitment, but also leveraging partnerships. And since this is involving the general fund in this discussion, recommending that council look at broad and diverse sources of sustainable revenue in this case. But that's for a later discussion. Moving on.
Madam Chair, you didn't recognize me. I want to.
Yes, I'm sorry, Mayor Member Bennett.
Yeah. Kristen, just for a second, I think you need to kind of, just in case it isn't clear the context this is in, we currently house around 8,000 people in our housing program, and that includes homeless, transitioning out of homelessness, people in difficult financial situations, and then just solidly low income. So we're dealing in a very large population. This is targeted at the absolute hardest to house. These are the people nobody was doing anything for, and they were dying at 52 years on the street, had severe health, mental health, addiction, felony, credit, problems, severe problems. And that has made this a difficult program, but it isn't, it is part of a real continuum of activity that we've been involved in the city through the Housing Authority and other programs. So I want to make it real clear, it isn't just 150 people. It's a huge number of people that we're dealing with here. I think it's important to understand that. And this discussion about the homeless initiative and all of that, what happened there is we had about almost $100 million being spent on these kinds of programs, and nobody had a real clear picture of who was doing what to whom. And it was kind of a lot of overlap. So one of the things we got was a money map. We finally know where the money's going. And so I think what we're looking at is, because of our focus on this, we are getting a real clear, I think we have a clear direction possible now in dealing with these broader issues. So I think at some point we can probably answer that question on who benefits. I think we all have a real opinion of who benefits and who's not playing. But we'll be able to kind of quantify that a little more clearly and have more pointed conversations with other governments around us that have avoided this real difficult problem. So I want to assure you that this is just the beginning of a long-standing issue, and it ain't going to be tents in the park. That's the main thing right now.
Thank you, Mayor Member Bennett, for those insightful comments. So seeing no more comments, moving on to committee discussion. This is an opportunity for Budget Committee members to bring forward lots of discussion. Of course, starting with the Andersons, Member William Anderson, if you'd like to go first, and then Tom, and then Member Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I would like to talk for a moment about the cut to the Youth Development Program. This is $176,000. The savings is barely an asterisk in a budget of this size. It does not make a significant difference, except when you consider the cost of this cut. Now, I'm an educator at Western Oregon University, and I took advantage of that opportunity for reduced tuition to take a lot of classes in the education program there. And I've learned some remarkable things about the effectiveness of youth development programs such as SCEF. I'm also on the board of directors for the Eagle Charter School, and a lot of our students take advantage of SCEF. And some people may just think that it's a matter of babysitting. These youth development enrichment programs aren't. One thing that we know is that if a child does not read to grade level by the 3rd grade, they are 75% more likely to drop out of high school and 7 times more likely to end up incarcerated. If we want our children to grow up and run the world, we have to prepare them to run the world in a responsible citizenship way. Now, in SCEF and other youth development programs, they're taught more responsible decision-making, respect for others and others' property. They're taught better decision-making. In other words, rather than going out there and perhaps being, after school watching television or getting involved in things that we would rather they not get involved in, they're taught important, enriching things. They're also taught when they have struggling with reading or with math or whatever, they're given an opportunity to get extra help with that, to get extra tutoring, etc. These sorts of things not only improve their education today, which improves economic prosperity in the future, it protects them from incarceration and protects us from things like juvenile delinquency. One of the things that I've had the opportunity to do is meet with a lot of parents who are affected by programs such as SCEF. One individual parent told me when I was discussing these potential cuts is they mentioned that without an after-school program like this, they would have to leave their employment. This is going to cause considerable financial strain. Now, I understand that part of the reason for cutting this is because the Salem-Keizer School District has listed this as a discretionary program. However, our school budgets right now, we don't know actually how much money we have. We face the same thing as Salem-Keizer does. We don't know the actual budget, and so a lot of things are being listed as being things like discretionary. And so I would really urge the committee to reconsider. $176,000 in savings is not going to do very much for our budget, but the cuts can do something very significant to those kids.
Thank you for that testimony, Member Anderson. Just a point of clarification, because we have the youth development funding, and we've talked about SCEF, and we know that's a separate entity. Would someone from staff please come down to speak to that, to clear it up, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just as a point of clarification, the youth program and community development funds several programs within it, sub-programs, I guess you could say, and that includes the Teen Action Program, Strengthening Families Program, the Service Learning Program, and then in particular relation to SCEF, the youth program provides $24,000 of gap funding, essentially, for SCEF's middle school after-school programs. So specifically programs targeted towards middle school age children for after school. That is, again, gap funding. That's not that's not even, I would say, it's a certain relatively small percentage of the total budget that is dedicated to after-school programs. That's not to say, of course, that this doesn't diminish the impact, but to give some clarity to our relationship to SCEF, and particularly to the programs that occur after school. That's that relationship quantified, a $24,000 annual grant that we provide as gap funding for that service.
Thank you, Chair Wright. And I just thank you, Director Wright. I just do want to second Member Anderson's comments that a penny of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and these investments that we make early on and preventative speaking do yield great rewards. It's certainly my hope that our recommendations towards council can include some stable funding or more diverse funding for these programs, so that dependent on the volatility of the community, we can maintain a stable presence in line with city and county goals. So, Member Anderson, I believe you were the next Anderson.
Thank you. Following up with my cousin Bill here on that. We do spell our names the right way. I do have another question for you, Mr. Wright. Not so fast. So, Mr. Anderson says it's $176,000 for SCEF, but I think you're telling us it's of that 176, only 24,000 of it goes to SCEF.
That's correct.
Just the rest goes to other city programs,
as well as to a full-time employee.
Okay. So you know, I can see one carve out there that we can maybe discuss later. The other point I would make before moving on to the issue I was going to raise was this is kind of a, I don't know if it's not the other side of the same coin, but it's the same theory that Eddie and Kate and Soren were talking about. We need to think about our children, what their lives are going to be like as adults. And they were talking about environment, outside natural environment, and you're talking about environment up here with the kids. I just want to make sure, and I haven't looked at the budget, but based on the resolution about the Peace Mosaic, that there'll be a $25,000 line item in the budget coming from Public Works, and I don't know if there is or not, but that's on my sort of wish list on that.
That'll be taken care of in this year's budget.
This year's budget. Okay, perfect.
So it sounds like another recommendation for the bike rack from Member Anderson.
Can I just make a short clarification?
So, no, not the Mosaic. He had a request for a carve-out regarding staff separating that fund, potentially, adding that to the bike rack between the grant, the position.
I guess we could, but I'd want to know a little more about it, because the way I read this, it says the city, we're doing this after-school stuff because the school district's not doing it, and it's only affecting a limited number of youth. And so are those programs different than the SCAF program, or are they the same?
Could you repeat that again? I'm sorry,
Okay.
Councilor.
Well, if $24,000 is for SCAF, I'm not sure what that acronym
Salem
is.
Kaiser Education Foundation.
Okay, and I really don't want to know, but now I know. And the rest is for after-school youth and teen development. That's where the other $150,000 goes. Is that how it works?
No, I can give you a full breakdown here. This may help. I'm going to back out the cost for our full-time employee who oversees all of these investments and the broader coordination with partners. And I'll just go through a list of what we actually have. The sum total of our grants, if you will, for these programs is $50,000, almost $51,000. That includes $24,000 for the Salem Kaiser after-school programs, again referred to as the SCAF programs. That's also $10,000 for the Teen Action Team. That's $9,250 for the Strengthening Families program, and that leaves $7,500 for a variety of other associated projects and one-time events that take place in a given year.
And if I may add, Director Wright, Member Anderson, I believe that Lori did a presentation last month, 2 months ago, on the youth programming and the success regarding the 10,000 Souls and other various campaigns done in the high schools and junior highs. Member Kaiser.
Thanks. While you're still there, Norm, is that position currently filled?
Yes.
Okay. Your other positions, though, that are slated for being cut are vacant?
That is correct.
Sounds like. Okay. Thank you.
Member Lewis.
Yeah, I think this is the right time to bring this up. It's under the category of safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure, and I'm going to ask it to be put on what I'll call my dream list. We have a situation in West Salem off Orchard Heights where 3 years ago there were 350 apartments developed, and then currently on the other side of the street there are 350 more apartments being developed in a very, very dense area. About 1,500 new neighbors. The reason I know this is because my picture window looks out on those 1,500 folks. They are within a quarter mile of a city park, Orchard Heights Park. They can't get there. And I heard tonight that we are putting in new or fixing the tennis courts. Well, these 1,500 people can't get there because there is no sidewalk. Right now, the developer who is doing the last phase of the apartments will have to put sidewalks on Orchard Heights in front of the development. It just makes too much sense to me to continue that sidewalk from the end of that development to the entrance to Orchard Heights Park. What really is frustrating is when I ask, well, why can't we just talk with the developer and see if their sidewalk people can finish the sidewalk for us. That seems to be something that is just not available. And I recognize that that's the way it is, but I would like to see some effort put into gaining those 1,500 new neighbors access to a park that's less than a quarter of a mile away.
Thank you, Member Lewis. If I can ask a clarifying question. You're seeking connection to the park for the sidewalk on the same side, but you'd mentioned both sides of Orchard Heights. I'm assuming there would be a crossing there as well?
The street that dissects the two apartments is Linwood. Linwood
Okay.
intersects Orchard Heights.
And then the other follow-up question, if the developer is responsible for developing the sidewalk in the right-of-way, and it still doesn't connect to the park, is there a piece of property that someone else owns that somehow that gap there? Is that city?
Well, yes, the city of Salem owns that property.
Thank you for that point of clarification, and it sounds like we have another addition for the bike rack. All right. Member Barker.
Thank you. 2 questions. On page 161, it shows the McKay Park benches, bike racks, and play equipment. And I was under the understanding that all of that was purchased with money, grant money that they got and donations that they got.
Thank you for that question. I believe staff have a response. Looking in the staff direction. And staff is coming down very stealthily.
Be stealth.
It looks like they're conferring. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Keller. I'm the Parks Operation and Recreation Services Manager. So the play equipment itself was through a grant that was obtained through Salem Parks Foundation. The actual development of the benches and kind of a seating area and I can't think of the word I want to think of, but anyway, is being paid for through these funds, through either the parks operation funds will pay for some, as well as through the CIP.
And it was the development of the playground area, not the equipment, that this money will help pay for.
Okay, thank you. Also, I'm concerned that we continue to cut positions out of community development. I've talked to City Council about this in the past, because since after 2008, when we had the budget crunch, we lost our liaisons to our neighborhood associations. And we have seen that program continually erode. And now we're cutting more people out of this department. And it just concerns me that neighborhood associations are not important anymore.
Thank you for that insightful comment, Member Barker. I think it really speaks to the importance of when these services are important, maintaining stable funding and making sure that funding is broad and diverse, and gaining community support for that. So I appreciate those comments. Member Kaiser.
Thanks. I just wanted to, I don't know when we want to do this and it's getting late, but HRAP program I think has been extremely successful. I think it's also one of the only sources, if I remember correctly, where we can house people who are sex offenders because they are not eligible for federal money. So our federal vouchers that we get to house them. So this is one of the only sources of money available to get people into housing that are sex offenders. So just another consideration for the Budget Committee as we look at potentially cutting that program in half.
Wonderful. Vice Chair Nordyke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of points. I appreciate all the comments scrutinizing the city's budget, as do I. And I also think the city should be commended whenever I see that they're saving money. And on page 65, the city attorney's office saved $250,000. So kudos to the city attorney's office for finding ways to save money. That's a lot of money concerning we're looking at cuts that are less than $250,000 for other programs. So I appreciate that, and I think that is worth pointing out. As for I really appreciate the fact that, as a city manager, looking at this enormous budget and trying to recommend any cuts anywhere is going to be tough. And there will be scrutiny of no matter what you recommend cutting. So I respect that. And I also appreciate all the comments about the youth development programming, the 176,000 or so. And like we often do, we ask the city staff a pop quiz. What does this mean? And I would prefer to see in writing what the budgetary impact is. I understand there are several potential programs involved. I don't know what those programs are. And I would like to see staff write that out, or at least point out where, if it is explained somewhere in our tome, I would like to see that, or I'd like to know that, because to me, I would be very hesitant to accept budget cuts on the backs of disadvantaged youth, English language learners, others for whom these cuts can make a huge difference in their quality of life and their future, as one of our member Andersons pointed out. So I'd just like to gather more information for the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Nordyke. Well said. And I think it's important to note, in the same way that sometimes not making a decision is the same as making a decision, when we're faced as a committee as to how we're going to pay for services, which is our responsibility fiscally, it's important to remember that members in our community are already paying for a lack of service, as you've said, or for cuts in service that they will be paying one way or another. So it's important to look at that. That being said, I wanted to go ahead and see if there is anyone present who would like to provide testimony regarding items not on this agenda. I see we do have a couple more members of the public, one shaking their head, another with no visual. Okay, perfect. Yes, you are. The limits for time still are in effect, but if there's anyone present who would like to provide testimony regarding an item not on the agenda, now's the time to do so. The planes are rapidly running out of fuel, so safely make your way to a microphone, please.
Thank you. Just maybe clarifying about the RFP comment. I'm a social worker in my day job, and we have really heavy caseloads, so I really relate to the aspect that sometimes you really want to do something, but you don't have the capacity to do that. So my comment about the RFP was that in my job, sometimes our wait list is so long that we really have put out an RFP to be able to have other agencies step up, be trained if necessary, or participate with us in providing the services that we provide. So that was the basis for the RFP comment. It wasn't about, it was more about addressing the capacity of the staff workers who do the work to coordinate the housing to happen. And then the wait list about 6, I read that in the newspaper, so that's where I got that number. Perhaps I need to look at the actual project information instead of the newspaper, so I'll be more accurate in the future. And then just when I'm talking to people, I'm hearing people saying that they just believe they're going to die on the streets. There's so much lost hope. And when you go to a warming shelter, it's a temporary reprieve. It's just a tiny little reprieve to be able to have some sort of shelter, some safety, not die on the street that night. And just that can sometimes make people have some centering and some ability to go forth the next day and fight the good fight and go again and try to move forward in their lives just because they had that break. And when we have a warming shelter able to do that, every now and then for some people, just for some night, it's still a Band-Aid. But the HRAP program is more than a Band-Aid. It gives that stability for a more sustainable way, and it's not a Band-Aid. It enables people to have some footing and some basic stability to build from, and it saves money in the long run. I understand it's different pots of money, but it does, but I know it's hard to track that, but there's so many studies that show that, and as a citizen, I hope that my city opts to invest in the long run, because the long run saves dollars and saves lives, and it's proven to be a successful program.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
So we're on to item 9 on the agenda, which is adjournment. Is there any other business for the Budget Committee this evening? Seeing none, we're all grounded. The meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, staff, for keeping straight faces all the way across there.
I did not succeed on that at all.
Your cards are